All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Karen Hyde. I'm your presiding member today for the Metro Inner Development Assessment Panel of Tuesday, the 17th of June. Welcome, everybody, and declare the meeting open at 9:33 a.m. I acknowledge that we are hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and we acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia and pay respects to elders past and present, and the ongoing connection between people, land, waters, and community. The meeting will be run in accordance with the DAP Standing Orders 2024 under the Planning and Development Assessment Panel's Regulations 2011. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the DAP website in accordance with Regulation 42A of those regulations. Members are reminded to announce their name and title prior to speaking. Panel members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them. I'll introduce the panel members. As I've said, my name is Karen and I'm the presiding member. To my left in the room, Ms. Francesca Lafante, Deputy Presiding Member. Further to my left, Mr. Tony Arias, Specialist Member. And online, we have for the City of Canning, Mayor Patrick Hall, Local Government Member, DAP Member, City of Canning, and Councillor Shen Sekon, Local Government DAP Member, City of Canning. And when we get to the South Perth item, I will introduce Councillor Glenn Cridland, Local Government DAP Member from the City of Perth. Item 2, we have apologies from Councillor Ben Kunze, Local Government DAP Member, City of Canning, and Councillor Bronwyn War, Local Government DAP Member, City of South Perth. Item 3, members on leave of absence, we have none to report. Item 4, noting of minutes of previous meetings are available on the DAP website. For Part B, for the City of Canning item, I will first seek a declaration of due consideration. Could panel members please confirm they've due considered all the documentation contained in Part B of the agenda, Part B related information, and the R13 direction response, which was published on the 13th of June 25, with a show of hands, please. Thank you. Yes, all have given due consideration to those materials. I'll then inquire if there are any disclosures of interest. Could I please ask the local government DAP members, was the Canning item considered at council?
No.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor Hall. There are no further disclosures of interest. We will move ahead with our agenda. And we are dealing with Form 1 DAP item 3.1, lots 5 and 6, numbers 240, 242 Wall Street, Queen's Park, for 25 group dwellings. We have some presentations this morning. We have 4 presentations. I have allowed those a maximum of 3 minutes each. And under the DAP standing orders, that is the limit. There's been no extension of time granted. So I would encourage you to talk to the key issues, the key items that you wish us to focus on. When you get close to time, I will let you know. Now, Justin, are you organising your team or?
Yes.
Okay. So today, panel members, we have Jay Samadi from Emergent Property, Justin Hanson from ERPS, Fred Zuderfeld from ZMH Architects, and Paul Gantus from RBI, all in support of the application. So once we've heard your presentation, I'll invite panel members to ask questions, and then later we'll refer to the officers from Canning and go through a similar process. So over to you, Justin, when you're ready.
Thank you. So the members today, Jay represents the landowners and project management. He'll deputise first. Followed by myself on planning merits, Fred Zuderfeld on architectural merits, and Paul Gantus on traffic. Jay, did you want to start your presentation?
Yeah, sure. I'll start. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, presiding member, panel members, and representatives from the City of Canning for your time today. I'll keep my presentation concise and allow our consultants to address the key issues raised within the RAR Emergent Property specializes in medium density infill developments and brownfield developments with a strong emphasis on providing high quality, affordable housing across the Perth metro area. Our primary consideration for this site was how do we create a commercially viable proposition while meeting the overarching objectives of the Queen's Park Frame Precinct. Although the preferred use of the site is noted as multiple dwellings rather than group dwellings, which is what we're delivering, the current commercial constraints facing affordable apartment developments in Perth, showcased by the extremely few number of affordable apartment projects being proposed or planned by the private sector, prompted us to design a project that is feasible in the current construction climate while delivering on the city's high-level built form objectives for the site. Our aim was to achieve the desired look and feel, affordability and diversity of a multiple dwelling project while providing a superior built form outcome compared to the traditional walk-up units that would have been envisioned for when this precinct plan was approved almost a decade ago. The two-storey product appeals to young local families and first-home buyers, while the single-storey dwellings set a benchmark in affordability and accessibility, with most of them offering silver accessible provisions and pricing starting from only $469,000. As our consultant presentations will highlight, we believe the project aligns with the intent of the structure plan and the medium density codes, delivering the desired density contemplated by the LSP for the site. The distinction between grouped and multiple dwellings should not be the sole factor in determining this project's merit. We believe that this is the primary reason for the city's recommendation to refuse the application, while not giving due regard to other aspects of the project. I would like the panel to contemplate, in light of our consultant's presentation, as to whether this is sufficient ground for this application to be refused. I'll also briefly cover traffic. Consultant Paul Newen is absent. He's written some notes for us to add. On access and egress, our proposal includes an entry only and exit only crossover on Centre Street, forming a one-way flow through the site, which significantly reduces traffic conflict and improves safety. The entry crossover's proximity to Centre Street and Wharf Street roundabout has been rigorously assessed and found to be safe due to several reasons. I'll let Paul from Irby run through that shortly. On parking, we provide 42 resident bays and 6 visitor bays, including 5 new street bays on Centre, exceeding the RCOD requirement of 16 and 6 respectively. The city's calculation of 9 visitor bays is incorrect and not aligned with the RCOD provisions. On carport dimensions, lots 12 to 19, carport widths of 2.7. The cited 3 meters requirement in the RAR is for enclosed garages under AS 2890. For open carports, the design envelope with 300mm door clearance on both sides is met, and swept path analysis confirms durability for a B85 vehicle, which is larger than 85% of vehicles on the road. On pedestrian and vehicle interaction, only 9 dwellings get access through the shared driveway regularly, with weekly waste collection and low speeds. Potential conflict is minimal, mirroring numerous compliant developments with shared driveways. Finally, on access, width and visibility, while the city references a 12-metre wide communal street for two-way flow, our one-way design with swept path compliance offers safe, functional access. A third-party review by Irby, Paul is present today, confirms that the entry crossover meets all stopping sight distance requirements from all approaches to the roundabout. Therefore, we request the panel to review the application based on its merits against the medium density type, the quality of the build form, landscape, and the benefit of providing much needed affordable housing to the surrounding community, and opt for the alternate recommendation to approve the proposal subject to the conditions stipulated by the city. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, keep rolling.
Yeah, we respectfully submit that the majority of concerns raised by the city are perhaps superficial and overly procedural, engineered to reinforce an inflexible interpretation of the structure plan rather than engage with the actual planning merit of the design. This is particularly evident in reasons 1 and 2, where there's discretionary elements are presented as prohibitions, undermining a balanced and outcome-based assessment. The reasons for refusal 1, which is related to the dwelling types. The first reason for refusal relates to the use of group dwellings in the railway frame precinct, which under the structure plan describes as a non-preferred use. However, the statutory instrument here is the local planning scheme, which zones the site centre it's dwellings as a discretionary de-use. Now that de-use is citywide. Clause 2D of the structure plan explicitly allows the discretionary uses where they align with the character and objectives of the precinct. That's exactly what this proposal does. It delivers medium density housing in a form that is responsive to context, feasible in the current market, and aligned with the precinct's objectives of intensifying residential development near the train station. Group dwellings also offer a tenure model that is more attainable and immediately deliverable, supporting housing diversity and fee simple ownership, both of which are highly relevant in today's market conditions. In short, this is not a departure from policy intent. It is a practical and policy consistent response. Reasons for refusal 2 asserts that the proposal fails to meet the minimum densities set out under clause 6.1 of the structure plan, which identifies an R80, R4 to R80 target for multiple dwellings. But the real objective is not the dwelling type, it's the density outcome that we're trying to achieve in this precinct. This proposal delivers 25 dwellings on a roughly 4,000 square metre site. This is equivalent to R60, well within the targeted range of R40 to R80. More importantly, when real world site planning is applied, accounting for access, deep soil zones, landscaping, bin storage, a compliant R80 multiple dwelling scheme will likely yield fewer dwellings than the current group level. I won't harp on that because I know Fred has some more technical examples to provide, which I can then lead on to Fred for your presentation.
Okay, thank you. The RAR sites R40 is a minimum development of the site. At R40, the maximum plot ratio would be 2,400 square metres. The plot ratio of the proposed development is 2,550. Therefore, the development is actually slightly larger than the minimum R40. Further on, the RAR refers to 63 dwellings possible at R40. This number can only really be achieved by 38 square metre studio units with no diversity whatsoever. The diversity within the proposed project is 30 or 1/3 and 2/3, 1/3 being the 2-bed units. With regard to some open space, the 2-bed units have split courtyards, one of 18 square metres and the other of 10, and achieves greater than the 20 square metres required under the medium density codes. The 3-bed units all have inverted living, that is, the living rooms are on the first floor, so they're not really directly accessible to a garden. But however, each living area opens directly to a balcony that exceeds the minimum area required for multiple dwellings. The build form of the development presents as a 2-storey continuous along both street boundaries, which is really what is envisaged by the scheme. The single-storey dwellings are almost completely screened from the public domain by the 2-storey structures. So really there's only 2 small openings that you'll be able to visibly see the single story from the street. The difference between the built form of a 2-storey multiple dwelling development and a 2-storey group dwelling is really wouldn't be discernible in terms of the desired outcome. And I think in some ways that the aesthetic of the group dwellings is actually better than the multiple dwellings. All of the 2-storey dwellings have the front doors facing the street, and the single-storey dwellings have through a break in the building, have a separate landscape sort of strip that gives access to the rear and onto a a shared space of the street and the regular access. The one-way traffic system that's developed for the street system is a much safer environment than if it was two-way traffic. All of the primary courtyards and balconies face either northeast or northwest, so that applies to every dwelling. And the RAR referred to the northern bin store as not being or having an impact on the amenity of Lot 11. That's not the case because the bin store is actually fully enclosed. So the smells and things are not going to affect the courtyard or the outdoor living area of Lot 11. And in terms of amenity, it should also be mentioned that this site is actually within 150 metres of the public open space at Queen's Park Reserve. Leave it at that.
Right, you've just got a couple more minutes left on your time frame.
Sure. Good morning, presiding member and panel members. Today I'll be speaking in support of the application with matters relating to traffic. So in summary, the proposal adopts a one-way looped internal circulation system with vehicle entry from the southern crossover and exit to the north. This layout improves operational efficiency, reduces internal conflict points and has been thoroughly tested using swept path analysis. The RAR expresses concern regarding the internal road width and shared pedestrian use. The internal road varies from around 3 metres to 5.7 metres in width and is designed as a shared zone. The adjacent pedestrian path is flush with the carriageway and increases the available manoeuvring space for vehicles. The use of shared zones is well established in medium density contexts with low speed, low volume environments. And here we expect around 12 to 14 peak hour trips. Internal vehicle speeds will be maintained to under 10 kilometres per hour and sightlines are clear throughout the development. The applicant proposes to install 10 kilometre per hour shared zone signage to enhance safety and compliance with that shared environment. The visibility and safety of the entry crossover has been assessed by myself. Vehicles turning left into the site are expected to be travelling at around 20 to 25 kilometres per hour. And you can see on the display, the sightline analysis we've undertaken. It confirms that, over 30 metres of clear visibility approaching that crossover, and that exceeds the sight distance requirements. So we did the sight lines for all three approaches of the roundabout. I'm not sure if they're all in there, but we did for all.
Can I just say you've used up the 12 minutes, which was
okay.
the four of you. So if you could start to draw conclusions.
Okay, thank you. And visitor parking, we've got 6 visitor bays in total. There's 5 on the verge and 1 internal, which meets the requirements based on my understanding. And in summary, we believe that the concerns in the RAR do not reflect the findings of our detailed traffic and engineering assessment. So thank you. I'll welcome any questions.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. We could just lose the shared screen. Thank you very much, Ash. I'll invite panel members now to ask questions of presenters. And first I'll refer to our panel members on screen. Mayor Hall, did you have questions of the presenters?
No, I don't, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Secon, did you have questions of the presenters?
No, I don't.
All right, thank you. Panel members in the room, questions of the presenters. Ms Lafante.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. Can you speak further about, you started your commentary today in relation to the finances, the financial consideration, and obviously I'm interested in understanding the relevance of that in the context of the planning framework. design. So what aspect is that you're wishing us to take away from? Is there an element of the design that has been changed or non-compliant or something like that that you are seeking some consideration of? I was not clear from the commentary.
Is that an answer for you on the finances, construction finances, medium density?
Yes, sure. I'll chime in on
What
that.
I'm trying to say is how does that
How does that
aspect
impact?
apply to the planning framework? Because obviously finances are not a matter or financial consideration.
understand.
I wanted to understand what that meant.
Yeah, thank you for that question. The only reason that was brought up is in the context of supply and delivering these projects. Multiple dwellings require the developer to carry the construction and deliver the end outcome. Whereas group dwellings, there's an option where the developer can develop the land and the end consumer can engage into their own construction. It's a more cost-effective way for developers to deliver it. At the moment, delivering affordable apartments with the current construction costs, it's very challenging. And that's why there's not many of them coming out of the ground. The only reason that was brought up in my presentation was the group dwellings, if it meets the criteria and the desired density, can be an alternate, more feasible approach to developing these sites that are otherwise sitting there undeveloped for a period of time until construction constraints are eased.
Okay. Are there, from the rest of the,
Yes.
is there any other planning related rationale for that matter that we should be taking into consideration?
There is from built form and a bulk scale situation. You could arguably say that the design represents a multiple dwelling situation. Now, looking at it on plan, clearly it's not. They're townhouses, they're group dwellings. So from a financial point of view, building terraces over building apartments, obviously town group dwellings are a cheaper outcome for the developer, but still maintaining the yields, still maintaining the bulk and mass, still maintaining a perspective from the street, which meets the framework objectives, which is the density to meet the train station.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
My second question relates to the configuration and design, particularly a number of the units contain 3 bedrooms, and I note they have, as you indicated, a split courtyard spaces. For the most of them that I am looking at, the ground level courtyard appears to be non-functional as a courtyard. Can you speak to the merit or otherwise we should give to the design, noting that the upper level for 3 bedroom has quite a small upper level balcony which interacts with the living space. So can you speak to that in terms of why that configuration, particularly the size of the active space, is appropriate? I suppose I have some concerns about the scale of functional open private spaces and its proximity to the living spaces. Why is this design, why should we consider discretion on this design for that aspect?
This particular case, the format of the dwellings with garages, each having its own garage downstairs, leaves very small amount of space on the ground for actual living areas. So it actually works out better to have the second and third bedroom on the lower level and have the living areas on the upper levels. With regard to the amount of space, the balconies are in fact larger than what would be required under the multiple dwelling codes. Each balcony or the minimum size balcony is about 14 square metres as opposed to 12 square metres under the multiple dwelling code. So the balconies are reasonably generous and some of them are much larger than that. So I think the outcome of having a balcony directly off the living area is more desirable than having a minimum courtyard on the ground.
And my next question is to do with waste management. My understanding from the material we have is that in waste management, the city are picking up internally. Is that correct?
That is correct. We've actually, the road system was actually designed to allow the trucks to enter the site and pick up from 2 locations within the site, which basically meant that the residents don't have to walk sort of from one end to the other to deposit their rubbish. So it's split between one at sort of the southern end and the other at the northern end.
Can you speak to, or one of your team speak to the TIS? And it shows a series of movements there. And I'm interested in the functionality of movements for waste as well as for vehicles. The TIS appears to indicate a series of manoeuvring movements that are necessary in order to adequately service and use even to access parking areas for those sites. I'm interested in further commentary about the suitability of the sort of multi-movement in order to achieve those. And I'm fundamentally speaking to the configuration of and the type of design you're proposing and the configuration. So if you can speak to that, I suppose I have raised some concerns in the context of what happens in reality. People trying to do multi-movements to sites.
Can you speak to that? Just to clarify, is that multiple movements for cars or for the waste truck? So I'm just having a look at the GIS. It looks like the sweat path for the waste truck, I don't think that needs to do any reversing movements. My interpretation.
Very tight movement as per the plan.
Yeah, so usually with the sweat paths, we provide a 500mm clearance. That's the ideal level of clearance. I think here we've got a 300 on the sweat path. But look at it, to me it looks like there is it is there, the clearance is provided on the sweat path, so I haven't prepared this sweat path, but the way I interpret it, it looks like there is space there. So usually
Sweat path, sorry, can we just clarify we're on the same page?
yeah, I'm looking at the
page, electronic page 2022,
okay.
22, and it's got the movement of the bin truck in the green, and it seems to be very, very tight. Literally coming, in order to manoeuvre, it seems to have to come right up to various physical structures. And we're on the same page, are we?
Yeah, I'm looking at the sweat path. It was in the TIS. It was the last page of the TIS. That's the.
Yes, that's what I'm
looking at. Yeah, I mean, usually when we prepare sweat paths for trucks, we do try to take advantage of the full burning apron because it's not efficient to try to design it to what we call being lane correct, and even on lower hierarchy access streets, it's permitted to use a full width of public road intersections for truck movements. Otherwise, the intersections get really huge.
So my question is not so much about lane correct. It's that there's actually in this design. It's not so much about lane correct, given that it's a one-way system. It's that the physical structures that essentially this is basically right up against on those in order to make those turns. So it wasn't a concern about lane correct. I appreciate a lane correct has all sorts of other opportunities, including verge elements.
Yeah. Are you speaking more internally on the corners?
I'm talking about the actual the whole plan. Coming in off the road, you're taking your one-way manoeuvring, and that is based on a city vehicle. I'm going to have exactly the same question to city officers. It seems
Yeah,
a difficult manoeuvre, because of the design configuration with physical structures, particularly your car parking, etc., right up to.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that it looks like to me that the design's been maybe done around the sweat path, so the sweat path has informed the design. So sweat path is provided, and then the building is located outside the clearance envelope, because it's really hard to design it that it fits so perfect. I think it's been the other way around, that sweat path has been done, but maybe the architect can provide feedback.
Can I just inquire, are you suggesting that what you're showing here is an absolute worst case scenario, or are you saying that these are, you know, normal, regular dimensions for sweat path? I'm not quite understanding where you're coming from, that the designs around the sweat path.
Yeah, just in response to the comment that the sweat path seems to be using the full width of that available space.
Right.
And touching the building. I think it's been the other way around, that the sweat path is provided and then the building's been brought up, but it's still outside the clearance. So I think that was done on purpose to maximise the building space.
You refer to Mr.
Oh, is that
Is it more the southern dwelling? Is that the one you're thinking is too tight?
So it's so you're coming in off the road, and you're obviously swinging. There's a lot of swinging of a vehicle to take the manoeuvring. So you've got to swing off the road. You then have to sort of sweep to come around the corner to structures that are physically fixed in those spaces, and like equally when you take the next turn, and those require you're then having to swing again to get in and out. Now that's for servicing on site, and I'm assuming they're then having to back end to pick up bins, etc.
Can I just make a comment with regard to, I think the sweat path diagram that was used in the RAR has actually been modified since we received that from the council, and we adjusted the position of both the two end dwellings to actually open up the corner more for that sweat path. I'm not sure why that isn't included in.
Okay, so we don't have that material. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not.
Well, are the development plans that are attached to this application the ones that you're talking about?
I'm just checking now that the revised report.
Sorry, if I may, the changes that were made, we added truncations to those end dwellings at his request as part of the final RFI. Truncations were added to all the units adjacent to the driveways to ease the manoeuvring for the truck. And we also moved the bin store to the north of the site on the exit to where that current green space is, to the northwestern portion of the site. So on the exit, there's no bins. That's just an open exit. So those bins adjacent to the exit common property have been moved down to I don't know, Justin, if you've got that final plan that was lodged with the city. I'm not sure why the RAR has been prepared based on the previous plan, but as part of our response to RFI, we added truncations that we moved the bins to ease the manoeuvring of the truck. It is compliant based on Australian standard, but obviously compliant doesn't mean excellent. So we tried to make it better by making those changes.
So can I just get clarity? Maybe the officers can assist us. Do we have the plans that would, it seems from what I'm hearing today is that there's some more information that we may not have. Is that correct?
So can we please refer to the officers? We've got Adams, Dilitano, Austin, Donaghy, Shaquille, Makbul, Johnny Lau and Troy Bozich at the offices. Do we have the correct development plans in front of us that were lodged with the city that the applicant is describing, please, which seem to differ from the screenshots in the RAR?
The
other right plans, yeah.
Through you, Chair, yes, the plans showing in the development itself are the most recent plans. I think the confusion lays with the TIS, which was originally lodged but not updated with the most updated plans.
Okay,
So the TIS relates to the original plans originally submitted by the applicant.
Yeah.
But the plans attached to the RAR are the most recent plans. And so the applicant didn't update the TIS to reflect the updated plans.
I have you have the updated.
the
TIS?
updated, no, that I don't believe. You don't have the updated TIS. Is that a condition in the alternate R13?
No, we didn't provide a condition for an updated TIS in the recommended conditions.
Okay. But have you assessed the development plans that are at attachment 1 of the RAR? And in answer to Ms. Lefanti's question, are you satisfied with the manoeuvrability and the turning motions, etc.?
Through you, President Member, yes, we have assessed the updated plans which form the city's assessment within the RAR and the recommended reasons for refusal. The city's not happy with the manoeuvrability of the waste truck. As you can see, as mentioned by one of the panel members themselves, they do come extremely close to the built form, which is the fencing and the landscaping of the dwelling as you turn the corner. Essentially, the common property driveway width is very narrow. It's the minimum probably that it could have provided in the development. The R codes require 12 meter wide width, which we wouldn't be having this discussion if that was provided as part of the development application itself. So essentially, the maneuverability internally not only compromises pedestrian movement because it's a shared pathway with waste trucks and vehicles going through a one-way system as well. Essentially, there'll also be issues with dwellings probably trying to go out through the one way because they're located closer to that entrance rather than going through the entire development itself as well. So the city considers that the proposed access maneuverability isn't ideal, can be better designed, and additional width provided to that to provide additional pedestrian and vehicle safety itself.
All right, thank you. I think that's Mr. Donaghy, isn't it? We'll come back to you with some more questions in a minute, but we'll refer back to Ms. Lefanti and her questions of the applicant at this point.
We do have a separate page which has paths which takes away all those meanderings, because the northern house, the northern dwelling, that's pushed a lot forward.
So where is that plan, Mr. Hanson? Is that part of the development plans at attachment 1?
Yeah, it was in the presentation, but from what I can see, it might have been a separate plan that was provided by the consultant. So the one that was actually in the TIS revision B after the fact might not have been the up-to-date plan. But I do have a separate plan on file, which may have meant to be substituted from the actual report.
Go back to you, Ms. Lefanti, for questions.
Thank you. My next question in the same context relates now to the specific parking. Typically, the requirement for parking is to be able to make a manoeuvre with a set distance for turning. The plans, and I'm now speaking again to a TIS that I've been advised is not updated version relative to your plans. So I'm not sure how this question may go. But the TIA that I have here shows again a series of manoeuvring points to access dwellings. Can you speak to the relevance of that? That is not a typical movement for driveway access to residential properties, that they should have sufficient turning to manoeuvre both in and out in a fairly simplistic movement. So the information I've got shows a reasonable amount of manoeuvring to a number of sites based on the plan I've got in front of me. Could you speak to that? And I suppose it goes to the planning merit of why would we support a configuration or the discretion to a configuration of that? What's superior about this in terms of
Yeah, I'm happy to
design?
speak with to that. Yeah, I've worked on quite a few of these types of developments where you have townhouses in a shared street environment, and it's usually the parking garages that are near the end of the driveway that they're the ones that you usually have to do more maneuvers to get either in or out of. And looking at these sweat paths, it does look like that's consistent with previous projects that we've worked on. So Australian standards, it does allow multiple maneuvers for what we call user class 1A. User class 1A is mostly residential parking. And the reason why it allows it for that user class is because typically it's a lower volume of traffic, number one. Number two, usually it's people that are familiar with the driveway, they're familiar with the parking arrangements. So Australian standards, it has different requirements depending on the user class of the parking. In this situation where you have a garage at the end of the driveway, Australian standards, it provides more leniency for multiple maneuvers. And even in the standard, it does say if you're following the Australian standard for user class 1A residential, some bigger cars might need to take 4 or 5 point turns to get in or out, which is something that's actually specifically mentioned in Australian standards. And being at the end of a driveway, there's low traffic volumes. It provides more tolerance for those types of maneuvers. And the advantage of providing that tolerance is that any space you can save for the movement of motorized traffic, you can rededicate it for other uses, which can benefit residents. So when we look at these designs, we try to minimize the space provided for vehicle maneuvering. We recognize it's probably just 30 seconds someone coming in or out of their garage, but then any space you can save for them, they can have a huge benefit by having a larger living area. So it's a balancing act, trying to dedicate or allocate less space for motorized traffic. So that's really I guess the philosophy behind reducing maneuvering space. So multiple movements near the end of garages or near corners, it is something that we expected, and it's been implemented on other developments.
Thank you, Paul. Sorry, if I may add to that. The sweat paths are shown for a B85 vehicle, which is a vehicle that is larger than 85% of vehicles on the Australian roads. So basically, the standard sets the benchmark for this type of vehicle. And if you comply with this, 85% of the vehicles on the road will not need to go through as many turning circles. So the sweat paths are compliant as per the Australian standard, but obviously they accommodate for the largest 15% of vehicles in Australian roads. On a traditional normal car will not have as many turning circles, even though this is compliant for a B85, but the normal day-to-day is not going to be what is shown on the sweat paths.
Thank you. Back to you for questions.
Nothing at the moment. I've possibly got another few, but
All right. Okay. Mr. Arias, questions?
Thank you, presiding member. Question about the context. In presentation, you indicated the proposed development fits into the current character, and I'd like you to expand on that, but not simply in terms of what may be there, but what context is planned in the structure plan area. Can you comment on that?
We can't revert to the slides, can we?
Can do.
First, say the third page. So basically there's very little development in this frame precinct to date. That one, I think that's like a catchment, one more. Yeah, that one. So the area that's highlighted yellow, that's essentially the frame precinct. That's you've got the train station to the south, which is expected to be the higher density. The next step back is the frame precinct, which is yellow. And then you've got the two blue circles on the plan, which represent the lower density, the R30 single story. So we are right on the corner of two other precincts that have a much lower density. Now the walkable catchment, I think the ARA reports that we're 500 metres from the train station, more like a kilometre from walking distance. So we are on the absolute edge of that frame precinct, which is essentially a mandate for multiple dwellings. If you can compare that in context to overlay 800 metres over at Claremont or Subiaco, no chance would you achieve multiple dwellings for that whole precinct. So from a context point of view, what we're providing two-storey outcomes, which is facing the street, providing that as a streetscape appearance, but from bulk and mass. If we were to retrofit some of the apartments or some of the dwellings to apartments, would the bulk and scale of the dwelling, of the overall development change? Probably not. If you did a pub test of standing on the street and looking at this development, we're looking at multiple dwellings or we're looking at crude dwellings, I don't think many would be able to tell the difference. So in here at the moment, from a context point of view, those developments that have been developed already in there, single story crude dwellings, but this is prior to the structure plan, which came in mandated that everything should be multiple dwelling in that area. So from a context, we're on the fringe adjacent to lower density development, where the transition, basically our site's the first of the transitional developments for some medium to high density, which we think in the broader picture of what the frame's trying to achieve, we believe that the current design of 25 dwellings meets that. We're basically sitting in that mid-range of R40 to R80. If you divide the land by 25 units, it's essentially an R60 product.
Okay, and just following on, you made reference to the structure plan, and clearly under the town planning scheme, group dwellings are discretionary use, so obviously capable of being approved. But the structure plan was only recently approved in the last few years by the West Australian Planning Commission and obviously by the council. So it's a recent document, and in terms of having regard, the objectives are quite clear in terms of the precincts they've identified and the current site. The intent is about multiple dwellings. I take your comment about potential transition, but at some point lines have to be drawn, and that's been drawn. Your view I think in the presentation is that due regard that the decision maker should give to the structure plan. I'd like you to sort of expand on your view about that.
Yeah, it is a recent, relatively recent structure plan, and ideally I'd love to go back and see the original submissions that were made, and I think the landowners that are probably in that area are thinking, wow, we can max out these sites. Land area divided by 120 gives us this much yield, but in reality, once you take away all the provisions requirements for design of multiple dwellings, access, open space, deep soil, you're essentially left with a third of the site to develop. So you then divide that land area by 120, and that works out to your actual effective yield. In this case, the ZMH's design of group dwellings actually provides a higher outcome, believe it or not, compared to multiple dwellings. 25 dwellings on site, as opposed to 18 to 20 in our calculations if it was a multiple dwelling outcome. So while the intent is there for the structure plan to provide this perfect scenario of the whole precinct being apartments, the reality of it is not there. Commercially, providing those same provisions on a Subiaco or a Claremont, why aren't they there? We're designing for Queen's Park. It's very hard to justify providing with an 800 metre catchment apartments across the whole thing. So one, has the structure plan been originally questioned to the nth degree? Was it a viable structure plan from the first place? I'll probably say no, it's not. The realities of apartments across that precinct, great in theory and utopian planning, but in reality, no. The tenure there is probably more viable option.
And in response to your last comment, obviously a decision maker, we have to have regard for the structure plan. In terms of a process, we can only rely that the process has been diligent and consistent with legislation, and we've got no reason to question that. Thank you, Presiding Member.
Okay. Just to go back to the issue of the reports and the documents and what we've got before us, just so that I'm clear, you're comfortable that the drawings, which are the attachment 1 to the RAR, the development plans, show the changes that you have made as a result of the comments that you received about the manoeuvrability? That's I'm going to break the questions down. So that's my first question.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. You then went on to say, I think, that there was a revision to the TIS. Now, what date is that revision that you're referring to? The date of the TIS, as you will see that we have attached to the RAR, is the 14th of May. It doesn't say revision 1 that I can see or anything like that, but it says the 14th of May.
We have, sorry.
Have a revision B on the end of the file name.
Well, I can't see a file name. This is by level 5 design.
Yeah, the 11th, May sounds right, the original.
May 14th, you say, is the revised version. So what we have before us are the revised development plans and a revised TIS. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, but it looks like one drawing out of that revision, which was waste, was I do have it on file, but for whatever reason, it was dated the same, but the truck movement, which is the one.
You're talking about the TIS now or the development plans? Yeah.
Yeah. The TIS, all but one plan is correct. It looks like there's a separate waste management design that was done.
That isn't included,
No,
or
correct.
it's not up to date.
It hasn't been included.
Okay, so when the city have said to us, as we referred to them, that they have looked at the updated plans and they have looked at this TIS, whether they were aware it was updated or not, they're still not comfortable with the manoeuvrability issues.
Yeah, they may be looking in the TIS, from what I can tell, the northern dwelling is a lot further back than what it is currently proposed.
On that particular plan, but they've looked at the development plans.
They look at the development plans, but that wouldn't have if you match the development plan with the truck movement, that one plan, it's not in sync.
Okay. All right.
Reduce that.
Well, it hasn't been assessed and we haven't got it. So, but thank you for that clarification. Just to go back to some other things that have been picked up in the RAR, there was some concern about the lack of geotechnical investigation and corresponding stormwater management. Have you done any further work on that, or do you accept that that is something that the city say is lacking?
We can accept that as a condition. I mean, it's fairly standard to have that as a condition post approval to undertake geotech and develop a suitable stormwater management plan. Other developments have been developed adjacent to the site, so I don't envisage major issues.
Okay, thank you. There's also been a flag around the removal of street trees. Would you like to talk to how you've approached that and how you've potentially compensated for that?
Yeah, I will briefly speak on that. So there's 3 verge trees on the verge. I don't know, Justin, if you have pictures in your presentation, but initially 3 of them were proposed to be removed. After the city's RFI, we've adjusted our plans, so only 1 tree is being removed from the verge, and 3 new trees are being planted on the same verge, as well as obviously additional trees within the dwellings and the courtyards and other spaces. So the net positive effects, I believe, will well outweigh the single tree that's proposed to be removed.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any further questions. Ms. Lafanti, did you think you had some follow-ups?
Yes, I do. Sorry, I have one further question that I did not speak to. Can I have someone speak further to the design? The design has been through 3 DRPs, noting that the final one was the chair. And the information I have here is that 2 of the 10 principals have received an acceptable supported position. One is not supported, which is the community, and the remainder are pending further information. Can you provide some comment about the design, and can you make reference to your comments against what we have in front of us, which is low support for the design of this proposal?
If I may just put a word, and then Justin can probably talk to the planning aspect. We went through 3 rounds of design review panels, and we made adjustments to accommodate. Initially, the feedback was around the development is overdeveloping the site and it's too dense, and then later on it was not dense enough and we had to increase height. So there was some mixed messaging there from a community perspective. Or many of the aspects of that design review panel minutes, I believe, are guided and influenced by the fact that the project is not multiple dwellings. That is my feeling. I could be mistaken, but I do believe that that has guided a lot of the conversation. So if we talk to whether a group dwelling versus multiple dwelling project is appropriate for the site, that will automatically alleviate a lot of the feedback and concerns from the design review.
Okay, Mr. Samadi, I think it was to Mr. Zuderfeld as well.
That's correct, actually. That we went through quite a few design changes to accommodate comments from the DRP, and even when some of the adjustments that were recommended were made, it still came back as a negative because of the fact that I believe that it's all being considered as multiple dwellings rather than as group dwellings.
No, that's it. Sorry, that was my last question.
Lovely. If there are no further questions, thank you to the presenters. We will now refer to the officers at the city, and I'll invite panel members if they have any questions of the officers. Mayor Hall, thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, I just wanted to ask our officers just a number of questions. The first of which was, given that the precinct plan, the local structure plan has been only relatively recently adopted by the State Planning Commission, and given the significant investment in MetroNet, does the city still see it more than ever as being fit for purpose?
Through you, presiding member, yes, of course, Mr. Mayor. The structure plan was originally approved back in 2017 and recently updated in 2022. Obviously, since then, little or no development has taken place due to COVID and then the cost of living crisis and the cost of construction. But what we're recently seeing now is increased interest in the core and the frame area for multiple dwelling development. And we are going through a number of pre-lodgement discussions with interested parties. which are saying a completely different message from what the applicants are saying today. They actually want to provide the maximum heights and even potentially go above those maximum heights to provide for affordable housing, 1-bed apartments, 2-bed apartments, and moving away from the 3x2 with double garage, which is virtually in every suburb in metropolitan Perth. So this is a train station precinct. The city wants to see increased density and multiple dwellings around the train station. I think everybody under the sun in the past couple of months has said so, including the Premier and the Minister for Planning. We need multiple dwellings around train stations, and this is what the Queen's Park Local Structure Plan provides for.
Thank you. Through the chair, just one other question. I just wanted to ask, if the panel were to exercise its discretion in relation to the application, how would the city see that approval affecting the future of the local structure plan?
Well, the structure plan has been designed to provide for a number of different built form outcomes through the 4 specific precincts themselves. So within the structure plan itself, the core and the precincts obviously want to guide that multiple dwelling development. But within residential precinct A and precinct B, you are allowed to build dwellings and single houses. If this development was approved within the frame, then that would prejudice the city's outcome, and that was approved by the West Australian Planning Commission to focus those apartments and those high density apartments specifically within the frame precinct and the core. It must be noted, this street precinct that encompasses George Street, Wharf Street, Railway Parade and Centre Street is largely undeveloped, and this is where the majority of mobility the frame precinct adjacent to St Norbert's School, for example, the majority of those residential lots have been actually bought by the school itself, and so that land is no longer available for multiple dwelling development. So the city seeks this street block as the key area within the northern part of the structure plan to achieve that density and to get those multiple dwellings built.
And excuse me, Chair, I apologise. I do have one further question.
Yes, please go ahead. Yep.
Mr. Donaghy, can you just confirm, just for my own point of view, the City of Canning's a large city, 65 square kilometres, 16 suburbs. This development would be approved in every corner of the City of Canning except for 2 small precincts, and they are at the Cannington train station and the Queen's Park station. Those 2 structure plans would prevent a development of this type, or is that true? There's only 2 areas of the City of Canning where this would not be desired?
Through you, President Member, yes, we only have 2 structure plan areas that restrict areas for multiple dwelling development itself. We also have a corridor along Albany Highway where we seek to have multiple dwellings built as well, due to it being located along a high frequency activity corridor itself. But with regards to our structure plans and our strategic planning for the train stations, these are the only identified structure plan locations and precincts that we restrict multiple dwellings to enable the city to provide that housing diversity and high density built form into the future.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing further from me.
Thank you. Councillor Second, did you have any questions of the officers?
Yes, I do. So I've got one question. In reference to the Queen's Park local structure plan and taking into consideration the zoning for this area as well, what would be the desired number of dwelling for this land size?
Yes, through you, Presiding Member, with the multiple dwelling requirement at R40, under Part C of the R codes, they're required to provide 115 metres squared average for each apartment. So at R40, you would get 34 apartments. At R60, you would get 47 apartments. But the city seeks to get that R80 density and the high density closer to the train station for housing diversity. So under this structure plan with a plot ratio of 1 at R80, you could get a total of 62 2-bedroom dwellings or 88 1-bedroom dwellings. The structure plan also allows for a 25% increase in plot ratio, and that would increase the number of apartments to 76 two-bedroom apartments and 109 single bedrooms, for example, at a plot ratio of 1.25. So as you can see, 25 group dwellings at an R80 density, which has been identified by the applicant in their planning report. And the minimum site area for R80 group dwellings is 100 square meters under the R codes. So this is an R80 group dwelling development. It's still undercooked from the city's point of view because we want a lot more dwellings to be provided on this site and within the frame precinct itself.
Just one other question, Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, please.
Thank you. So I just wanted to confirm that this development application falls way short of the desired dwelling that the city sees for this precinct.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you to the elected members for those questions. In the room, Ms Lafante.
Thank you. To officers, could you just confirm that almost last comment, which was, I wrote down here that the proposal does achieve an R80 density. Could you clarify further that response? I know you went on to talk about the expectation, but can you make some comment on that in the context of what is the railway frame precinct density, which I've got here as R40 to R80?
So yes, under Part C of the R codes, group dwellings are as per site area minimum and average requirements. So under R80 group dwelling code, the minimum lot size is 100 square meters, which is provided for in this development itself. An R60 code, for example, would require a minimum lot site area of 120 square meters. So the development itself has been designed for the R80 group dwelling. And this is clearly outlined in the applicant's planning report in attachment 3, which mentions that on multiple occasions. So I don't see how it's an R60 development as being presented today when the site area requirements clearly meet the R80 code for group dwellings and also has been designed to the R80 code itself. Within the frame precinct, multiple dwellings can be constructed at an R40 to an R80 density coding. There is no density coding for group dwellings within the frame precinct itself.
I've got a follow-up question, and I want to get this clear in my own head. The concern about the density, is it form that you're concerned with as opposed to number of units from what I'm just hearing?
I think it's both essentially. If you build R80 apartments, multiple dwellings, you get more. If you build R80 group dwellings, you get less. That's the density argument. But also in the height and the built form argument, R80 apartments can go to 4 stories. Under the structure plan, you can have 5 stories. So it's a bit of both. Essentially, to answer your question, the structure plan provides the flexibility of the dual codings R40 to R80 in that built form, but it's also the density as well. R80 group dwellings don't provide the optimum outcome for the site. And what I said earlier on is R40 apartments, for example, would provide a greater lot yield and dwelling yield than they are to R80 group dwellings.
My other next question is that the locational considerations of the site being on the intersection, from the material I have in front of me, it sits at a junction with within the frame precinct, but opposite the residential precincts A and B. Can you speak to the what weighting or otherwise its locational context was informed your evaluation or assessment? Or did it?
Well, outlined in the RER itself, the structure plan does provide for the stepping down in heights with the density codings from the core of the frame down to residential A and residential B with the different group dwelling requirements for R40 and R30. So under the frame precinct, you can construct from 2 stories minimum up to 4 stories max, with a 5th story available under the structure plan as well. So with regards to the step down and the transition to the periphery of the structure plan with residential A and residential B, they would be a minimum of 2 stories. The frame would be 2 to 4 stories and potentially 5. So there is that step down in height. And then to the further north and further east outside of the structure planning area, it's R30 residential zone under LPS 42, which obviously can have a single and 2-story height limit under the R codes itself. So the structure plan does have the ability and the discretion and the flexibility to provide those differing heights.
I'll continue. And can you speak further? We did already have conversations. I'm interested in your further conversation about the site design manoeuvrability for all types of vehicles that are proposed as part of the development, service vehicles, loading, any other regular sort of vehicles will come to site, and car parking for residents, the manoeuvrability. You've heard what I've asked previously in the commentary. Can you provide some response in the context of this design? And I am aware that your comments, and can you speak to the design relative to the TIS? I have expressed some earlier commentary about the functionality and movement of it. Can you speak further to your comments? And you did indicate earlier about some reservations you had.
Well, through the chair, it's Troy Bosich here. Look, from the city's point of view, having a one-way, we think having a two-way system would work a lot better than having a one-way system. We do acknowledge, we would like to see how the rubbish bins are going to be emptied on the new layout in terms of the truck, how close they can get to the bin area, or how far the bins need to be pushed to the truck or to the rear of the truck. In terms of reversing and the 3-point turn or 4-point turn, we do accept that in some locations. However, we do see that there would be a benefit to this being two-way access rather than the single access, and or especially the houses up against Wharf Street having to drive through the whole development to be able to exit the site.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. My question is really again around the context and the desire for multiple dwellings over grouped dwellings in this location. I think the city's assessed this as being about 500 metres from the station. That's more or less as the crow flies, and yet more likely an actual walk we've heard is to be about 850 to 890 metres. So this puts this development on the edge of the frame and at the furthest extent of what one would regard to be a reasonable walkable catchment for the train station. And yet I'm hearing from you that you feel that this is still the right location for perhaps a development of multiple dwelling typology up to 5 stories. And I think you did talk about, well, I think it was perhaps at the extreme where you talked if this was 100% single bedroom development, you might get, 3 figures of single bedroom development. But what is your view around the appropriateness of a development of that nature in this location on this street frontage, 10 minutes walk from the train station? And, really we wouldn't want to see, would we, 100% typology of single bedrooms? I mean, the R codes themselves talk about a diversity of products. So we're never actually really going to get the maximum number of small studio apartments. I'm interested to understand a little bit more about your view about the specific location here. Never mind the blanket of the planning document that we have to give great regard to, but really about this specific location and the form that development ought to take there.
Yeah, absolutely. Through you, President Chair. Well, the Canning Bridge structure plan, for example, is a good structure plan which provides the maximum height the furthest away from the train station. The precinct apartment complex in Canning Bridge, as you go up the hill, is probably nearly 900 meters away from the train station. It's 20 stories high. So you have to take into consideration the site context relating to each structure plan itself. With regards to the Queen's Park local structure plan, the structure plan itself is constrained by having a primary school and a high school in the direct middle of the structure plan itself. So there will be no multiple dwellings within that street block, which is within 0 to 400 meters of the train station. Likewise, to the south of the train station, there is a large warehouse lot which is included in the train station, but it's unlikely to be developed within the time frame of the structure plan itself. Again, that's a large area of the structure plan that's constrained. To the west of the school, for example, that has been subdivided prior to the structure plan being gazetted. Again, that is constrained from having potential multiple dwelling, and that's actually located within the frame precinct itself. So as I mentioned to you earlier, this street block, which is encompassed by George Street, Centre Street, Wharf Street and Railway Parade, is largely undeveloped. It has the ability to provide for multiple dwelling development within a 10-meter walk of a brand new train station that's only opened 2 weeks ago. So in the opportunities of the structure plan, this is the area where we want and can achieve multiple dwelling development. Just because an application comes along that seeks to construct 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 2-garage group dwellings, which can be constructed anywhere based on the feasibility of development, doesn't really tie in with the objectives of the structure plan itself, which essentially aims to create housing diversity and provide multiple dwellings along with group dwellings and single houses within the structure plan itself.
Okay, thank you. And I think yourself or one of your colleagues mentioned that the structure plan itself was prepared in 2017 but updated in 2022. What were the key changes? Has this density and desire for multis been in place since 2017, or was that one of the amendments that was introduced in 2022?
Through you, Chair, the requirements for multiple dwellings has been there since 2017. Essentially, in 2022, it was minor changes to delete the requirements that were in SPP 3 and just changes to some of the wording within the structure plan to provide consistency with other local government documents. So there were minor changes essentially made in 2022, but the intent for the multiple dwellings and the location of the multiple dwellings has been there since 2017.
Okay, thank you for that. Any further questions before we... Yes, Mr. Arias.
A question also around context. Obviously, within this framework area, the land is underdeveloped, probably a good way to describe it. Has the city had applications within this area for development?
So there has been previous subdivision applications which sought to carve up the land for group dwellings, which the city has pushed back against, and the WAPC did uphold those decisions. With regards to multiple dwelling development, for example, we're only starting to recently see that coming through now with the uptick in land values and the certainty around the construction of the train station itself. As I mentioned earlier, the structure plan was originally gazetted in 2017. We did see some initial interest then, but obviously from 2020 onwards, that kind of waned with COVID and the cost of living crisis, so to speak. So we're only now, probably in the last 6 to 9 months, seeing that interest in multiple dwelling development in this location within the core and the frame.
Okay, but as yet, no formal applications.
We have seen some applications on the other side of the structure plan in terms of multiple dwellings, which have been 2-story. But in this street block within the frame. We haven't seen any applications at this stage, just pre-lodgement discussions.
Thank you.
All right, there are no further questions. We will move ahead with the item. Thank you to the officers for their responses. And we will take things in the order that we have them in the RAR. And just let me go to my bookmarks. Sorry, just bear with me a minute while I just get the bookmarks to work, which they're not going to. Okay. We have before us a responsible authority report, which in the first instance recommends refusal for this application on a number of grounds. So do I have a mover, please, for that as the primary motion? Mayor Hall moves. Thank you. Is there a seconder, please, for that? Councillor Secon seconds. Thank you. Mayor Hall, as mover of that as the primary motion, would you like to speak to it?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to speak to the recommendation as put to refuse the application in its current form on the basis that, as we've heard, does not currently comply with the Queen's Park Local Structure Plan and is significantly inconsistent with the railway frame precinct requirements. I'd make a point that the railway line there, this precinct, has only just become as important as it must be for the future planning of this state. It was only last weekend that, after almost 2 years of closure, the brand new Queen's Park train station was open to the public just last weekend. So I would expect that we will see renewed interest in that area. Along that rail corridor, just 1 kilometre away, also within almost walking distance to this precinct, is the Cannington train station, the largest train station on the entire Perth to Armidale line, just 1 kilometre away, very easy walk. That also has a similar structure plan. And just 500 metres from there is the $100 million City of Canning investment in the City of Canning City Centre project, where we're building an entire city centre around that train, the Cannington precinct, to future plan and future proof for what we know is required by the state. The state government's multi-million-dollar investment, Madam Chair, in the Southeast Rail Corridor, known as MetroNet, has been a key component in the future population growth of this state. And the population growth in this state is proposed to be 2.5 million by 2030. Government has put out a considerable amount of literature in relation to the projections for population, and 3.4 million at 2050. That's just 25 years away. We're projecting another 1 million residents in Perth. Future planning for those projected population growth is critical. Madam Chair, I'd make the point that for a local government and a mayor to sit here today refusing an application on the basis that we are looking at greater density rather than less density is a really rare occurrence, and I think that it should be supported in this instance. Our city understands that greater density in transport corridors is critical to the future urban development of Western Australia. We are at the City of Canning a pragmatic, sensible, forward-thinking local government, and on this occasion we're signalling our support of the state government's vision to a state government-appointed assessment panel. We also see greater density, particularly in this location, as a lever to unlock housing affordability in the rail corridor in Perth's southeast corridor. And I heard frequent references to Subiaco and Claremont. This is not Subiaco or Claremont. This is Perth's southeast corridor, where affordable housing and greater density is a key component of state planning. The subject site, as I said, is only 500 metres from the new Queen's Park train station. I take your point, Chair, in relation to how the crow flies. I'd say it's also walking distance to the Cannington station. And the applicant seeks to significantly underdevelop this site, contrary to the long-held planning requirements for this important rail corridor. If this panel were to support this application using its discretion, it would set a precedent that would see a planning outcome that would be contrary to the interests of the state of Western Australia, and will result in jarring inconsistency in what is hoped to be the future built form in that structured precinct. The precinct demands higher density transport orientated development, which will lead to better community environmental outcomes, create population hubs around quality transport infrastructure, and result in more people leaving their cars at home. That's what we would like to see. I would also say that aside from the significant underdevelopment of the subject site, the development itself has critical design flaws highlighted and underlined by the design review panel and the city's own officers. This does not seem to be a development in keeping in any shape or form with the planning outcomes that are demanded of this precinct. Again, I'd make the point that this is rare for a local government to support greater density where less density is offered. Yet such is our belief in the importance of this precinct and our support for the state government's vision that we feel compelled to do so. As was raised earlier, the WA Planning Commission recently approved this local structure plan for good reason, because it aligns with the needs of the region and also the state. And that is why on this occasion, I would encourage the support of my colleagues on this panel in support of the recommendation to refuse the application for all the grounds highlighted by those who have spoken before me. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. Councillor Sekon, as seconder, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, please. Thank you, Madam Chair. I do not support the development application for 240 to 242 Wall Street, Queen's Park. Having reviewed the City of Cairns report, technical advice and the design review panel's feedback, I find the proposal to be fundamentally inconsistent with the planning intent for this site. The railway frame precinct under the Queen's Park local structure plan was specifically designed to deliver medium to high density, multiple dwellings in a transit-oriented development area. The proposed 25 group dwellings fall significantly short of the density targets for this location, resulting in inefficient land use close to public transportation infrastructure. Higher density development in this precinct would encourage more residents to walk or cycle to the nearby major shopping centre, Carousel, the Cannington Leisureplex, and the Queen's Park train station, which was a core objective when the Queen's Park local structure plan was developed. This supports more sustainable urban living, reduces car dependency, as my colleague Mayor Patrick Hall just said, and helps alleviate congestion on local streets. Approving this application in its current form would set an undesirable precedent for underdevelopment and car-dependent housing in an area planned for compact, sustainable growth within the railway frame precinct. For these reasons, I fully support the City of Canning's recommendation and I refuse the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sekon. Thank you. Did that freeze? No, they're still there. Okay, lovely, thank you. Other speakers for or against the motion in the room? Mr. Dante.
I will speak to the motion. At this juncture, I do not support a refusal, but I equally don't support an approval in its current form. My position at this juncture is for a potential deferral, but I will speak to my comments just generally. I think that there is some merit for the proposal. I think that there is significant information for me that is missing for me to make a final and a final consideration of this. I have been through all of the documents and particularly the structure plan. I note that there's been a lot of commentary today about the other uses in the area, including the school. This site, both in terms of its structure plan detail and its locational context, gives me pause to consider this type of development in this form. It's directly opposite on two sides, residential development, which creates a transitional opportunity. I'm not as satisfied that this site will be the main driver or impact on the realisation of the structure plan. I do think that there is some merit in relation to it. The concerns that I have is that I'm not satisfied with the material I have in front of me in relation to the accessibility for service vehicles and the manoeuvring and functioning of the parking. And it has been noted today, there is inconsistency in the material we have. As far as I'm concerned, we should receive additional material in order to reconcile those two aspects and have a complete body of information from both applicant and city in relation to it. I understand the applicant's commentary relating to functionality and design in terms of the layout, but I do have some concern, and whilst I accept affordable housing is important, I'm not comfortable that affordable housing should ultimately have some compromise in relation to the functionality of the development. In my perspective, has been spoken today, a number of these proposals are 3-bedroom and they are designed to obviously have a greater number of people. I think the language that was used today is family homes, and from my perspective, the configuration of the open space and the connection to the living areas is insufficient in relation to the design I have in front of me. I have given due regard in all of these matters against the structure plan provision. My final aspect ultimately around is concerns around the design form, scale and height, and I'm particularly talking about the 10 design principles. I note from the material that has been written in the design principles that primarily the concerns talked about the multiple dwelling, and whilst that is a form of development required in the or spoke about in the structure plan as a preferred development, I am of the opinion that the design form and scale can also be considered in its context with surrounding sites. However, the material I've got is I am uncomfortable that the proposal ranks in its current format so low in terms of acceptability against those 10 design principles, and I would be seeking further material on that for me to make an informed decision. So from my perspective, I have given due regard to the merits of the structure plan. It is an important document, it is a more recent document. There's a significant change in relation to the station, but I've also weighed that up against the form we have in front of us in terms of the density that they're seeking on the site, as well as the form and scale, and as well as its locational context. And whilst I would encourage and support the principle around multiple dwellings, I don't agree that it blankets any consideration or prevents any consideration of other forms of development within this precinct, and those come into things like locational context and form and scale and design of the development. So for me, I am, I suppose, currently sitting on fence and am of the view that additional material would be warranted for me to make an informed decision one way or the other on this proposal, and those are the elements that I would be looking at from my perspective.
Thank you, Ms. Lafante. Mr. Arias, would you like to speak?
Thank you, presiding member. I will be supporting the motion. I do it with a degree of reluctance, particularly in the current environment we are in terms of housing provision. Mayor Hall, I think, articulated the reasons for not supporting the current development very well, and I won't try to deal with those issues because I think he's done a terrific job. But in terms of the reason for arriving at that position, the structure plan that we've discussed is a key planning instrument which is intended to guide the development of this area. And as has been discussed mentioned through the meeting, as decision makers, we need to have due regard. And that due regard should be around purpose, vision and objectives. In that context, I think what is also relevant is that the structure plan was reviewed and approved by the Commission in the last few years, which I think just adds further weight to the relevance and the consideration. The plan, the proposal does not meet the requirements of that structure plan. in my mind, and I think it needs to align much more closely in order to be supported. So on that basis, I will be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Arias. I will speak to the motion. I probably share a similar view to Ms. Lafante. At the moment, I'm not entirely comfortable with refusing the application purely on the grounds of the structure plan. I think a density coding and multiple and group dwellings can very often in a location like this appear very similar, and simply requiring multiple dwellings is not necessarily going to afford the city any more development than we're seeing here. I don't accept the argument that developers will necessarily work to create 100% single bedroomed units. I mean, there are mathematical equations for things, but that's not necessarily the reality of the way that the development industry works and the way that the market wishes to buy and occupy a development. And I think affording opportunities for family accommodation within proximity, as previous speakers have outlined, within proximity of a couple of stations and close to facilities is a good outcome. The structure plan, whilst recently reviewed, does date back to 2017. In its origins, we have gone through quite significant changes in that time, and we have different demographics and different demands. My view is that there should be a little bit more sensitivity about the way that that structure plan is applied and the context in which it's applied. I see this location within the Queen's Park structure plan area and within the railway frame as being perhaps better associated with a more modest development as we have before us, rather than a taller 5-storey development. However, I also have some concerns about the actual information we've received. It is unfortunate that the information that was provided and assessed perhaps was not everything that the applicant had updated, but it makes it very difficult for us without that further assessment, particularly of the manoeuvrability and of the application of waste management in this format of development, for me to be satisfied that it is safe, that it is functional, that it can actually work. And so I would have preferred to have seen all of that information provided and some further response to those matters presented to us in a full assessment. I too was foreshadowing a deferral, but I am not in a position to at this point really support the reasons for refusal. But that said, upon assessment of further information, I may not be equally able to support an approval. But having said that, I do feel that this may be an appropriate form and typology of development for this location. So that's all from me. I'll refer back to Mayor Hall as the mover for right of reply and to close debate. Mayor Hall, if you can still hear us, we're not hearing you or seeing you. There we go. We can hear you again now. Sorry, would you like to start again?
Sorry, you're a little bit frozen on screen. Can you hear me loud and clear?
We can indeed, yes.
Thank you. I was just going to say I raised the subject of affordable housing only in the context that one of the first speakers, Jay Samadi, used his opening statement to reference the commercial viability of the development, a theme that was touched on by other speakers. Undoubtedly, there are commercial reasons why the proposed proposed underdevelopment of the site, but these considerations by the applicant should not outweigh the merits of a planning framework which has been put in place and endorsed by the State Planning Commission, the WA Planning Commission, to guide the state government's planning vision and the future planning needs of this state. I do understand some of the concerns, for want of another word, by a number of the panel members, but we do have a responsibility to reach a decision today if we can. I have sufficient information in place to make that decision today. I thank the panel members for their consideration and their input into today's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. I will now put the motion before us to refuse this application to the vote. Those in favour of refusal? That's Mayor Hall, Councillor Secon and Mr Arias. Those against? That's Ms Lafante and Ms Hyde. The motion is carried 3-2. That draws this matter to a close. And in closing, I'd like to thank Mayor Hall and Councillor Secon and the local government members for their attendance and participation, thank the applicant for their attendance and presentation and responses. Yes, please. I'd like just quickly to proceed with a procedural motion just for a short comfort break. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Moved by me, seconded by Ms Lafante, carried unanimously. We'll come back in about 4 or 5 minutes. Thank you. for your patience this morning. We will now commence Part C of our agenda. The panel for Part C is myself, Karen Hyde, as presiding member, Mr. Francesco Lafonte as deputy presiding member, Mr. Tony Arias as specialist member, and Councillor Glenn Cridland as local government DAP member, City of South Perth. And we welcome Councillor Cridland to the panel. Could I please check that all panel members have given due consideration today to all materials? Thank you. Due consideration given by all. Item 2, disclosures of interest. Councillor Bronwyn Moore disclosed an impartiality interest in that her office is located in the building adjacent to this proposed development. The Executive Director considered that and Councillor Moore is not sitting for this part of the agenda. Our fourth item 3.1 or 3.2. Are there any other declarations of interest? Councillor Cridland.
I don't think it's a declaration of interest, but my dentist happens to be, I think, 2 doors down from the proposed 3-storey medical centre, Wood Street. It's probably more of a disclosure rather than a declaration of interest.
We note it, thank you, but I do not regard that to be really even an impartiality interest. It's a very loose connection. You may change your dentist at any time. So was this matter considered at council?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay, that's all fine. So we'll move on from disclosures of interest then. Thank you. We'll move through our agenda as swiftly as we can. At item 3.1 in the first instance, we have lot 46, number 142 Coode Street, South Perth, which is a proposed 3-storey medical centre bracket dental practice. There's a little bit of competition there for your chap. In accordance with the DAP standing orders clause 4.8.2, presentations are limited to the 3 minutes. I've not given any extension of that. And so, as most of you are used to, please stick to the matters that you wish us to focus on and the important points that you wish us to consider. We've got 2 presenters for this first item. That's Dan Lees from Element Advisory and Peter Damon from Level 5 Design. Both in person. You've been allowed 3 minutes each. I'll let you organise yourselves. We'll probably hear from both of you and then open for panel questions. So when you're ready.
I'll go first then, if I can. And I'd like to acknowledge the panel and thank you for the opportunity to do the deputation. Also, I'd like to acknowledge the support from the city's officers in the RAR for this development application. I'm a parking specialist, and I just very quickly want to focus on some parking issues related to this development. So the city's made an assessment around parking. It uses parking provision rates within its town planning scheme, which I assert are quite high. And so we've done a traffic impact statement looking at the parking, and we assert that the state government's parking provision rates are more appropriate. The state government, through the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage, have encouraged local government to adopt a more consistent and appropriate rate, which would mean in this case for medical centre that the rate would be lower at 2 bays per practitioner. Parking provision rates or generic rates aren't a great way of determining the needs for development, but it is one way of doing it. We would normally recommend that a site-specific assessment be done, and that's what we did. We did some traffic surveys, and that revealed that the demand for parking was much lower than what the prescriptive rates suggest. The surveys indicate only 51% of people actually drive to the existing dental clinic in Angelo Street. Many patients are sedated, and the parking requirements are therefore lower. There's a high degree of public transport adjacent to this site, and I won't go through all the points in my deputation, if you can take it as read, But basically what I'm suggesting is that there is a high amount of public parking around this site. The smallest amount we found was 51. So at all times there was more than 51 parking bays free around the site. And therefore, this supports the potential viability, reducing the on-site parking requirements of the development and a lower cash and lieu provision for this site, more consistent with those state government requirements and our on-site specific surveys. I might leave it there.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lees, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, panel members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the approval of this unique opportunity to adapt and expand an existing commercial building, Street and South Terrace, to provide for a contemporary cosmetic dental practice. The existing building, despite its Art Deco appearance, was constructed in 2001, and it contains a mix of offices and consulting rooms. It provides a strong street presence to this intersection and the local centre, which already provides a range of health services and is an established medical hub for the community. And the South Perth Hospital is located a few doors away. This proposal involves a building expansion and a contemporary third-storey addition, so as to accommodate a cosmetic dental practice. This will result in significant improvements to landscaping on site, which is currently limited, as well as increased street activation and visual permeability through the ground floor windows. We've worked hard with the city's design review panel and the city's officers to get to this point, and we do thank the administration for its efforts with the report. Car parking has been a matter discussed in detail with the city, and I know this has culminated in a recommendation for approval, but with condition 11, which requires cash in lieu for 38 bays. We would respectfully request that DAP approve this application today, but with the deletion of condition 11 so that no cash in lieu is payable. As noted by Peter in his deputation, the DAP has the more contemporary DPLH WA Planning Manual car parking rates to take guidance from, as opposed to the city's local planning policy. These DPLH rates were published in November last year and seek to establish consistent rates based on a rigorous process to establish them, including scenario testing, which culminated in a suggested minimum rate of 2 bays per practitioner. Applying this rate, we would only require 20 car parking bays, with 14 bays provided on site, plus 1 turnaround bay. This results in an on-paper shortfall of only 6 bays and not 38, as assessed by the city. This demand for 6 car parking bays that we are not providing on site can be readily met and in fact exceeded by the available surrounding public car parking bays. As noted by Peter, undertaking real-world parking surveys as part of this application, it was found that there was always between 51 and 74 bays available, public bays, within a 300-metre walking distance of the subject site. Alternatively, looking just at the actual number of staff and the expected number of patients, and as set out in the city's report, there would be a forecast peak demand for approximately 22 car bays. So even in this scenario, there is an approximate 9-bay shortfall of bays provided on site, again, which can readily be met by the dozens of available surrounding public bays, as evidenced by level 5 designs and surveys. This proposal provides extensive bike parking and end-of-trip facilities for staff, and there were also surveys undertaken of existing patients at our client's existing practice on Angelo Street, which found that between 50 and 75% of patients undergo some form of sedation and so are unable to drive. Also looking at the way that they travelled to their appointments, approximately 51% of patients did use a car. Many of those, however, were dropped off, and actually 49% of patients arrived via rideshare, taxi or public transport. I realise I'm out of my 3 minutes, so in closing, we do believe we have presented a compelling evidence base with respect to car parking and the reasons why cash in lieu should not be applied. Between Peter and myself, happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentations. Panel members, Councillor Cridland, any questions? No? Mr. Arias, any questions?
Yeah, thank you. Just a clarification. In your presentation, it refers to actual shortage of car parking bays. I think the figure 6 based on DPLH, but there was also a reference to 9.2. I presume, is that based on your own surveys? Is that the difference?
So the 9.2 was based on the number of staff which is a condition recommended by the city, or 10 practitioners, as well as the number of patients that each practitioner can be expected to receive, and accounting for some changeover between appointments, and then also applying those survey results in terms of the number of staff that can be expected to drive to work, and also the number of patients that can be expected to drive to their appointment versus those that get dropped off or use alternate means. So yeah, the short answer is yes, that number is based on some real world surveys and
Site-specific data.
Site-specific data, experience at our clients' other practice financial registry.
So then to clarify, in terms of your view about what the deficit of car parking is it the 6 or the 9?
It's somewhere, it's 6 or 9, somewhere in between. The 6 is based purely on the DPLH rates. The 9 is based on the real world survey and evidence base.
Presiding member, a further
Yes,
question?
please do.
And the suggestion is that presumably whatever the deficit might be can be addressed through on-street parking and through the public car park at the hospital.
Correct.
Who owns that car park?
City of South Perth own it in the holders, as I understand.
Yeah.
So it's
On-street parking is obviously a public resource owned by the city as well.
right. And is there a fee attached to the car park? Do you know?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Arias. Ms. Lafante, questions?
Yes, I have questions about probably a combination of parking and people. The plans I've got here, so what I'm trying to clarify is what is your staffing number and what is driving that? And then I'm going to talk about your patients. The plans I've got in front of me show 15 surgeries, a number of consulting rooms, on the upper level a big office area which takes almost 30 seats in that office area. And then you've got sort of a lab area which has got acrylic ceramics and stuff in it. What number are actually going to work here? Because it seems an awful low number for the scale of this development I have in front of me. I think you've got 10 practitioners, and I can't recall the exact number off the top of my head of support staff. That seems phenomenally low for this plan. So what is it based on, and how is it actually going to be controlled, given there's a condition that says you have to limit them to such a low number compared to plan?
Thanks for the question. And yes, this application was originally formulated based on a higher number of total staff and practitioners. The city's noted that on page 12 of the agenda. So this application was originally formulated based on a total of 30 staff, and 19 of those would be practitioners. Through the assessment of the application, through a number of RFI engagements with the city, put forward an alternate proposition in terms of staffing numbers, which will still work for our clients. So this is still a commercially viable proposition based on the reduced number of staff and practitioners, which is set out at condition number 4. That is the application that's before that at the time. The original building, which was designed for a large number of staff. However, the number of staff was negotiated down with the city based on concerns that have been with respect to sufficiency of car parking.
That's another question. Yes, please. So what design changes did you make to comment, because you now got less staff needs? So what design changes were made to this plan that reflects that reduction in staff?
Design changes were more providing end-of-trip facilities for staff, clarifying and improving upon the landscaping on site, ensuring the car park was appropriately designed with a turnaround bay. So the scale of the building has not been reduced commensurate with the reduction in staff.
So how are they controlling it? So I'm actually quite curious, because I'm going to have exactly the same question to officers. This seems to be an unusual scenario where you're saying you'll reduce the staff because of parking, but the design hasn't changed, and I don't have any material that I can draw on that says, how in practice is your applicant going to control that requirement other than a cited condition?
Given the extensive dialogue with the city and the position that we've got to and the condition, I mean, these staff and practitioner numbers discussed with our client, and we are comfortable that this is still a functional and commercially viable proposition, which is why we're here. So we are readily aware of this being a limitation in terms of the intensity of use of the site, because of the extensive discussions that we've had on car parking. But it's fair to say that, you know, there was a level of ambition in this project when it was originally formulated. Clearly, it is a site with constraints. There are always constraints when electing to maintain an existing building and modify and expand it, as opposed to demolishing it and building from scratch and introducing a basement car park, for example. So there is an element of working within the constraints of the existing site, having regard for the building. It's not heritage listed, obviously it was built in 2001, but it still provides a very, I think, a strong and quite prominent presentation to the street. For anyone who's travelled through that intersection, I think that building is you know, quite visually prominent. So there was a conscious decision from our client and their architect to retain the existing building and expand upon it. I think there's also an opportunity to, you know, subject to the approval today, monitoring the parking situation, monitoring staff and patient travel behaviour, as our client has done at their Angelo Street practice, and perhaps revisiting this in the future, subject to there being a demonstrated sufficiency of parking in the locality. Obviously, we are looking at a hybrid solution in terms of bays provided on site, as well as the demonstrated availability of public bays both on street and in the City of South Perth car park nearby.
My last question is to do with the parking. You've spoke today, and the material gives us some information that you have peak periods as a day surgery, predominantly have drop off and then pick up. You also spoke about the nature of those individuals, many having had a level of sedation, therefore unable to drive. And I acknowledge that I'm aware of how those elements work. But what I am interested about is that predominantly those patients are picked up by a person. They're not getting into a car on their own, whether it be rideshare or otherwise. They're not driving. What management, can you speak further about the on-site parking and the parking provision directly related to this development for your clients, based on the specific nature of this, which appears to be kind of a day surgery more than your typical medical consulting room. This has a different nature to it. And I have, again, similar questions to the officers.
Production or the provision of a pick-up drop-off bay within the car park is one specific.
Is that just the one bay?
Yeah. Yes.
Can you, sorry to interrupt you there, can you speak further, because your report says you have a peak period for drop-off in the morning and a peak period in the evening. How does one bay address what the report tells us about the nature of this, which is a lot of people coming pre-surgery at the beginning of the day and then going after surgery? How does that one satisfy the nature of this proposal?
Seem to be a balance between providing non-time restricted bays for patients versus those getting picked up and dropped off. Clearly, there are a number of bays set out for patients and a number set out for staff. If the panel felt it appropriate, more of the bays set aside for patient parking could be labelled and controlled as pick-up drop-off bays.
The patient parking can be used for drop-off and pick-up as well as the drop-off pick-up bay. when we did our analysis, we acknowledged that drop-off and pick-up has a much higher turnover. When people come sort of to pick up at certain times in that peak period, so they might only come for 10 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes, instead of coming for longer periods, which a normal patient would come for and stay. So the turnover of that parking is much higher during a pickup situation. So, you know, if they're coming for only 10 minutes and you get 6 cars an hour parked in that pickup bay, whereas when people are coming as a normal patient, they might be coming for 45 minutes, half an hour, and then consequently they'll be parked there longer. So that was factored into our estimates of parking turnover.
Okay, lovely, thank you. If there are no further questions of the presenter, we'll refer, thank you very much for your presentation, we'll refer to the officers. We have Steve Dupiaxi, Brianna Murphy and Fiona Mullen here from the City of South Perth to respond to our questions. When we finish questioning, if there's anything that you wish to fill in the gaps on, I'll come back to you. Councillor Cridland, did you have any questions of officers?
No, I didn't.
Okay, thank you. Mr Arias, any questions of officers?
Yes. Obviously, the discussion this morning has been predominantly around the car parking. You would have seen the presentation by the applicant and refers to DPLH calculations and proposes that method rather than the scheme calculations. Have you got a comment on that?
Yes, thank you for the question. So the city has assessed the car parking rates against its local planning scheme requirements. So the city has a local planning policy that specifically relates to non-residential car parking rates, which was adopted in May 2024. So it predates the WAPC document. So in accordance with the deemed provisions clause 67 sub 2 provisions, due regard was given to the city's planning scheme requirements in terms of the parking, as opposed to the WAPC document that's not policy.
Just because I didn't make it clear. So you said the city's policy post-dated the DPLH.
Yeah, so
study?
Yes.
So did you have regard for the outcomes of DPLH?
Yes, so we did consider it in our application, which I guess is why we are recommending support for the proposal. The city is satisfied that the parking can be accommodated off-site, but yeah, I guess in terms of the cash in lieu condition that we were imposing, that is where we've assessed it against our local planning policy.
Okay, so but the difference is the method of calculation. So the applicant believes that the deficit is much less than the 38 bays that is recommended. Obviously, the city officers don't agree with that.
Well, yeah, we can only assess it, I guess, in our development assessment against our local planning scheme.
Okay, so
Ms Mullen,
just to be
have
clear,
a follow up, Mr Arias, to that.
yeah, sorry.
If I may just clarify, so the city's local planning policy predates the WAPC guidance. So the city's policy was adopted in May 2024 and the WAPC guidance is November 2024. So I just wanted to clarify that it actually predates that guidance, and that's why those figures from the guidance document to the WAPC have not been incorporated into the city's local planning policy. Sorry, thank you.
And so the calculations based on the local planning policy, not on the scheme, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you, Mr Fante. Questions?
So a couple of questions. I've already asked about officers. Can you provide some comment around the staffing numbers and the parking? And it's in the context of a reduction of staffing numbers, but no change to plan. Can you speak to that in the context of the proposal and whether or not it is directly or primarily a connection related to parking requirement as opposed to use suitability or scale intensity on that site. Which of that sort of what's driving that? Principally parking?
Yes, yeah, it was driven by the parking demand. Yeah, so initially, as Daniel mentioned in his presentation, there was 30 staff, of which 19 were practitioners. Yeah, I guess the parking rate that was generated by that, yeah, is what I guess why the city requested that the staffing numbers be reduced.
How does the city ensure compliance with the condition for staffing numbers in the context of my earlier comments that the scale just purely on consulting rooms, surgery, lab shows my observation to require more than the 21 in total at any one time on the site. And given that a day surgery has a variety of activities that go with it. How are you actually going to ensure compliance on that condition that you've requested? And the second part of that is, does that condition number, is that critical on your position of supporting this proposal? How are they tied?
Yeah, through the chair. Yes, I mean, it is a fairly unusual condition, and I accept that you would not normally condition numbers because the enforceability of a condition would come into question. The city is satisfied from working with the applicant that it is possible to actually control the numbers of staff. It would be a case, it would be based on evidence if the city required it from the applicant in confirming how many staff were present on site. And what the applicant also explained was the way that they may correct me if I'm wrong, but the way it can operate is if one of the surgeries or consulting rooms has been used for a patient, then the practitioner may move to another consulting room to see the next patient potentially, or that could be being set up while the other is prepared or cleaned or whatever, so correct. But it was most definitely based on the practitioners. The city had a number of meetings with the applicant, and the city considered that this total number of staff was a position that the city could accept in terms of the parking requirement for the site. But it would be based on evidence requested from the applicant, from the operator, if the city had any issues with the way the site was operating.
I have one further question. The material we have in front of us has I think it's in attachment 4, design review commentary. There's 3 considerations. One, and the final one being a chair. Can you speak to your comments on support, given that it's achieved 5 supported and 5 pending? This is the appropriateness of the context of the built.
Thank you for the question through the chair. Yes, the particular recommendations related to the design and the sawtooth roof buildings, gestures, the building silhouette, and the connection between the proposed timber cladding and the jetty reference. The city, in conclusion, felt that the design that was put forward by the applicant did actually address the context and character within that immediate locality. So whilst, yes, that did remain as pending further attention, the city ultimately, which is the aim of the point of the DRP, felt that the design had incorporated the elements that the DRP was seeking and were able to support it.
Those are my questions.
Thank you. I've just got one quick one. We've got a number of operational conditions 4, 5 and 6. You've opted for those specifically as opposed to asking for an operational management plan, which could be updated from time to time to the city's satisfaction. Obviously, with conditions set out like this, they're quite explicit, and so if there were changes, then that would come back through the city or come back through the DAP. Could you just explain to me why you've gone for this approach rather than a more broad or general operational management plan?
Thank you to the chair. The number of staff and the hours of operation were negotiated with the applicant, and it was felt because these were very specific in terms of the city's support, in terms of the number of practitioners and the hours of operation as well, which also related to noise regulations. It was felt appropriate to be very specific, but I certainly take the point that if there were to be any changes, that would require a further development application.
Okay, thank you. If there are no further questions at this point, I thank the officers for their responses, and we will refer to the item before us. The Responsible Authority report recommends that we approve this application subject to a number of conditions and advice notes. So in the first instance, please, I would be seeking a mover for that as the primary petition. Is there a mover, please? Mr. Fante moves. Is there a seconder, please? Mr. Arias seconds. Thank you, Mr. Fante. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I have listened to the material that's been today and material we have in our RA and the supporting documentations. I think the development is good development. I think it's excellent that you are reusing a building, quite a significant building on that corner, and I commend the design team for incorporating that building, and the design has incorporated material differences to show the building form. So from my perspective, I think that's a great design. I'm supportive of some of the variations that are given in terms of things like site cover. And so those, from my perspective, are acceptable. I note the comments regarding design and the elements that have been provided in the city's response as not being an overwhelming concern in relation to the proposal itself. I'm comfortable that the impact of the development will be minimal in terms of the nature of the proposal. However, I do have some reservations in relation to staffing and parking. For those reasons, I am not proposing to make any changes to the development. I know there's been a request for a condition change. I don't support a condition change, and whilst I understand the rationale of that condition request change in terms of cash in lieu, I think on this proposal in this location, and given the surrounding network, particularly that there is parking that supports this and other development is actually managed by the city, I believe that at this juncture, without any detailed evidence that proves demand for and operation of the site and development is not unduly creeping into those particular areas, that I'm comfortable that it be retained. So whilst I note there's a parking shortfall and there's some challenges in relation to getting on-site parking, but I think that balancing that with a provision of the cash in lieu is appropriate in this particular nature. And that doesn't prevent, obviously, further processes once operational and there's some further evidence, but in this particular case, I am comfortable to leave it as it is. I know there's been some concerns raised regarding this proposal, particularly in the context of parking. However, I also note that this proposal has indicated in its plan that it's a principally weekday activity, and therefore there is some parking element of relief. I also note that the parking control within the local area, some is limited to time and other is untimed and uncontrolled. So from that perspective, it is a matter that the city can continue to manage, but a concentrated area for this type of development is appropriate in this corner location, and I support the proposal as it stands.
Thank you, Mr. Fante. Mr. Arias, as seconder, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, presiding member. The site zoning allows medical centre or dental clinic as discretionary land use and therefore capable of approval. In terms of the objectives for the local centre, the proposed development seems to meet those objectives, which is around providing small scale services for the neighbourhood. So I think it fits into that. In terms of the context, the location of the site on two major roads, in proximity to South Terrace, Granada Freeway off-ramp, Canning Highway and the hospital, I think it provides an appropriate context for expansion of the medical centre. So from that perspective, I think it's compatible with the locality. In terms of the planning, other aspects of the planning framework, it would seem based on the RAR that it's generally compliant. Where it's not, it's sufficient good reason for discretion. The issue of car parking is something that is problematic to me. And I, like Member Lafante, I'm somewhat uncomfortable reducing the car parking based on the information we have. The disparity between what the council believes appropriate and what the applicant believes appropriate is great. And we are also provided with two different examples by the applicant of what the deficit might be. So from that perspective, whilst I think there may be scope for a reduction, I think based on the information we have today, or I have today, I'm not prepared to amend the condition. So I will be moving the motion as is with the recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Arias. Councillor Cridland, did you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you. This is a development that is entirely in keeping with the local area. There are a number of medical facilities on both sides of South Terrace, and it's very close to the South Perth Hospital, which is the only, as far as I'm aware, continuing community hospital in Australia built by the local community. Clearly, this sort of use fits in perfectly with that sort of area. It's over the road from a chemist. So that's all good. I think that's a very appropriate use. There are 15 surgeries and 2 theatres. It's going to be a significant building in comparison with some of the others around it. And I thought there were some very good questions asked. Not sure how staff numbers will be kept that low. I can't see how parking will be readily dealt with on this particular site. I think that there will be probably some difficulties in waiting for pickups and drop-offs for people who are a bit groggy after their surgery or whatever. I do know, from speaking from personal experience, that it's very difficult to park on the street in South Terrace near the hospital if I have to go and have a blood test or to visit my dentist. But I also know that the Birch Street car park has a number of car parks that are available, which is that 150 or 200 metre walk away, which was a car park originally designed and the hospital thought it owned for the purposes of providing weekend parking for the oval there and through the week parking for the people who visit the hospital. So I think there is some local parking. It won't be terribly convenient, and I think there will be some issues with drop-off, but I think it is a good development of not an iconic building, but a significant building, the Easy Berryman building, and I'm happy to support it. I'm generally very keen for appropriate numbers of on-site bays to be provided, but I think, notwithstanding that people might find it a little bit difficult or frustrating sometimes with the drop-off, I think there is close enough parking. And money in lieu can be used to improve that aged car park, perhaps to provide better quality parking for the users of the medical facilities in this area. So although it's not perfect, and I think the DRP report indicates that, I'm happy to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Cridland. I'll speak to the motion. I'm in support. I think it's a good reuse and additions and alterations with the extra height. I'm not concerned by any of the non-compliance issues, the site cover. There are no setback variations. The height change is very marginal. I note there's not large trees planted, but there's lots of smaller ones. And I think, you know, what's what's within the deep soil area or proposed elsewhere, we'll cover that. I perhaps felt a little bit more flexibly around condition 11. I clearly don't have the numbers, but I was actually satisfied with the demand analysis, and I did take heed of the Commission's perhaps more overarching assessment of parking for non-residential development. So I was mindful that perhaps the 38 bay shortfall was somewhat overestimated, and that the shortfall was somewhat less than that. However, as Mr. Arias has highlighted, there still seems to be some variation, whether 6 or 9. And again, as Ms. Lafanti has identified, there is a lot of space in the development where there is the potential for other activities to go on. And noting Councillor Cridland's local, very local knowledge of the area, clearly there can be alternate uses of a cash in lieu that could improve the public parking available and perhaps the connectivity to that, to make it more comfortable and appropriate for even patients of this facility. So with that said, and clearly with others not prepared to make that change, I will leave the matter as it is. I would, however, propose one amending motion, and that would be to condition 8 and to the last sentence, which I feel just needs a couple of other words. The plan must outline the parking bay allocations and arrangements for managing staff and visitor parking. I'd like to insert the words "and visitor," please. That's an amending motion moved by me. Do I have a seconder? Ms. Lafanti seconds. I don't think I need to speak to it. It's pretty obvious from the discussion. Ms. Lafanti, did you wish to?
No.
Other speakers for or against the amending motion? Let's put the amending motion. Those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. I therefore don't have any further amending motions or anything further to say about the application. So I return to the mover, Ms. Lafanti, for right of reply and close.
No further.
Nothing further. We will put the substantive as amended to the vote. Those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. That draws item 3.1 to a close, and we will therefore farewell to those not presenting for the next one. We have a continuing, I think, because you're staying with us. We will invite the presenters for the next item into the room. You know, somebody puts amongst us their papers, their empty papers, back in the bowl of lollies. Definitely not me. Mine are all in my pocket. Maybe it's the planning commission. Blame him.
But then you said yes.
Sorry.
I thought about those things, but the questions were good.
Oh,
Surgeries.
Is everybody coming in?
Yeah, they're coming in now.
Doing this.
Exactly.
Worked out perfectly then.
All right, we'll continue with the agenda and item 3.2, which is for strata lots number 1 to 5, numbers 1 to 5 of 65, South Perth Esplanade and South Perth, and a number of other lots on Harper Terrace for mixed use development. We have a number of presentations today. I think we have 3 presentations. In accordance with the standing orders and clause 4.8.2, presentations are strictly limited to 3 minutes. I've not provided any other extension of time. So presenters, and you've all been here before, encouraged to stick to the key points that you wish us to consider, and we will then follow up with questions afterwards from the panel. So first we have Mr. Peter Simpson from PTS Town Planning presenting against the application. Mr. Simpson, I think you're online. Yes, there you are. Can you hear and see us okay?
Yes.
Very good. So 3 minutes are all yours when you're ready.
Thank you. As you'll see by the agenda, we submitted a submission on behalf of the adjoining owners at 63 South Perth Esplanade. Some of those matters have been addressed, but our key consideration hasn't, which is the side setbacks and the visual privacy. And what we know from the planning framework, including clause 7.2 of the schedule of LPS 7 and 8.2 and the deemed provisions, is you need to consider both the existing and the future development of the site. So in terms of context, the existing site is a regular rectangle shaped block that has 2 street frontages. In our view, there's no need to therefore seek variations to the setbacks and visual privacy to the side boundary. In relation to the context for our client site, it contains 13 strata units, of which 10 of them are under the control of 2 groups. So there aren't many strata left that are individual stratas on the site. So the redevelopment potential is quite high. In our submission, we indicated the balconies and major openings that we had issues with, and realistically, they go up all the way up through the building from level 1 all the way to the top. I must admit, I haven't come across an application where a balcony to a side boundary at 1 metre setback is considered an acceptable outcome, let alone design excellence. So I'm not going to go through each of the plans because obviously we provided those details, but the location of the balconies is a significant issue. These balconies can't be screened because screening them would actually involve the whole of the screening of those balconies. So what we're asking the DAP to do is take into consideration the impact this will have not only on the existing development at 63 South Perth Esplanade, but also the future development, which is likely under the current planning framework. So we thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Panel members, questions of Mr. Simpson, Councillor Cridland, Mr. Arias, Mr. Fanti? I don't have any questions either. Thank you. Your presentation was very clear. So with that, we will move ahead to our next presenter, which is Mr. David Hillam from Hillam Architects, speaking in support of the application. And you have a PowerPoint presentation.
Thank you, DAP Chair and DAP members. I just wanted to, I guess, review the process. So I'm just trying to get this. Okay. Review the process we've been through. We've been through 3 meetings with the design review panel. On each occasion, we received very positive feedback, and we've worked very closely with the City of South Perth to address all issues raised by the city in order to achieve a recommendation for approval. Sorry, this is a bit slow. The project is a mix of ground floor commercial tenancies and premium quality residential above, including rooftop terrace. Certainly through the process, we ensured that in order to achieve design excellence, that we exceeded all of the requirements for design WA. And just going back as to, I guess, what the project outcomes that we're aiming for, certainly a premium quality development. We wanted to provide a contextual response. That was very important. And we were very focused on the streetscape experience and improving public and private amenity. The project, importantly, achieves a average 7-star NATUS and a 4-star Green Star rating. It's interesting in our design, we looked at both the historic context of the site and also the contemporary context. And in responding to that, what we wanted to do is bring back more of a historic context, particularly in the podium materials. A lot of projects in this sort of precinct have a very contemporary response, and through the actual design of the podium and also the landscape elements, we've certainly tried to bring some of that historic context back into the project. We're highly conscious of the activating the Harper Terrace frontage, and we've worked closely with the city to achieve this. And certainly we have sleeved the car park and achieved maximum activation of the street. Sorry. The cafe tenancy on the corner provides an active community benefit in that it activates that corner of the Harper Terrace and the Esplanade. And the other element in the design that we thought was very important was a transition from commercial to residential. So we have thought very carefully about that transition, where the commercial essentially is focused on the eastern side of the site, and then purely a residential focus on the western side of the site. There's just one condition relating to privacy and the amenity. Well, it's not just one condition, but there's one condition which we'd like to discuss. Firstly, we acknowledge the existing condition. It was our intention to screen to the side boundaries, but we take on board the city's feedback. And in terms of addressing that condition, we suggest a minor variation to that, where we believe that, that we can certainly screen the sections indicated, and then we landscape as per the city's recommendation the front portion of the site, where there's an opportunity to look backwards onto the existing property. So certainly it's been our approach in all of the design elements to consider the neighbours' privacy, and through the podium we expect to achieve that result. And we believe that the city is satisfied with all other elements of privacy up through the actual tower structure. That's our understanding. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lees. Do you want to follow on?
Thank you. And it's now good afternoon. So good afternoon, panel members. Thank you again for this opportunity to speak in support of this residential focused mixed use development on what is a prominent corner of Harper Terrace and South Perth Esplanade within the activity centre. The proposal is closely aligned with the city's desired future character for the area, and will make a positive overall contribution to streetscape and skyline of the locality. This opportunity stems from the assembly of the existing lots that are in multiple ownership, so as to realise this key corner development site. The proposal has undergone a rigorous assessment by the city's planning team and the design review panel, with the crucial awarding of design excellence having been achieved. The city has also supported the proposal from a land use and built form perspective, recommending approval subject to fairly typical conditions. As set out in my written deputation request, we are requesting some minor wording changes to conditions 6, 7 and 13C, and we understand the city is in agreement with those changes. I'm happy to take questions now.
All right.
With regard to condition 5, Roman numeral 6, David has just presented the proposed additional landscaping arrangement for the northwestern side balcony of apartment 301. And it's respectfully requested that this arrangement form part of the approval. This provides an improved visual privacy interface to the neighbouring property, having regard for both the existing condition and the future redevelopments of area. We acknowledge the objection that has just been presented on behalf of the owners of that neighbouring building. This proposal is consistent with the envisaged built form and scale for the activity centre, which inherently contemplates that there will be some reduction in the enjoyment of visual privacy within the precinct as properties are progressively redeveloped. We also note that the setbacks and visual privacy elements have been supported by the city in its report, which also referred to or acknowledged that change in expectations for visual privacy within the activity centre context. Separately, our other request is condition 13, Roman numeral 1, F, which requires the conversion of one visitor car bay into a short-term loading and delivery bay, which is in addition to waste collection zone that is on the plans. We believe it is overkill to require a separate waste collection bay and a loading zone, with the large waste collection zone effectively being a loading bay that can serve the multiple purposes of waste collection and short-term loading and delivery, and which will only be used for brief periods of time. The detailed management arrangements that would allow for the dual use of this waste collection zone can be appropriately documented in the access and parking management plan that's required by condition 13 in any case, and the final waste management plan that is required by condition 34. So this can ensure that waste collection happens uninhibited, but also that that same space can be used for brief pickups and drop-offs, but could also be looked at in advance for things like furniture delivery or larger deliveries, and that can be coordinated with the waste service provider to allow for that dual use of the space through a managed solution. So thank you for your time, and we respectfully request your approval today with some of those conditions changed as requested.
Thank you, Mr. Lees. Panel members, questions of either Mr. Hillam or Mr. Lees? Mr. Cridland? Councillor Cridland. Mr. Arias?
Thank you. Clarification, you made reference to condition 5.6. The condition requires modification of balcony. And it's a question we'll direct to the city's officers as well. Is that in response to the objection from the adjoining owners? Is that what that responds to?
It's in part, and then it's also in response to the city's recommended condition. So the city's recommended condition would require that balcony to be basically converted into landscape space, inaccessible landscape space, and set back 2 metres from the boundary. So we've proposed an alternate configuration that goes some way to addressing the city's concern, we believe, and it also goes some way, we believe, to addressing the objection we just heard.
Do you have a further question?
No.
I'll come back to you if you do. Ms. Lafanti, questions of the presenters?
Yes, my question is around the additional provision that you've just been talking about in terms of servicing and loading. And there's been a lot of commentary in the RA in relation to its locational context and the narrowness of Harper Terrace and the use of Harper Terrace and the demand for it and the impact that a development of this nature would have on functionality and traffic circulation. Can you provide further comment on your rationale for this change?
Harper Terrace is a narrow street. We acknowledge that. This is an activity centre context. Having said that, there is on-street parking available through the precinct. What we've proposed with this conditional change is that, as shown on the plans, the waste collection zone is a large space. It's that size so as to accommodate a waste truck manoeuvring in and out. We believe that that space can be efficiently and effectively used for multiple purposes, both for waste collection, which will happen. There are 3 waste streams. Just referring back to my deputation request. So we would expect that the zone would be used by a waste collection vehicle 9 times per week. So if we allow a certain number of minutes for each of the times that the waste collection vehicle is loading and unloading the bins, there's more time than not that waste collection zone will be free and not used by a waste collection vehicle. I think it's an efficient use of space and appropriate that this space can be managed for dual purposes, and we feel that can be done through coordination with strata management, the waste service provider, which will be a private collection, part of the contract between the future owners and the waste collection provider, so as to allow for the occasional use of the space for things like furniture deliveries, supplies being delivered to the cafe, sorts of pick up and drop off and loading that we feel can happen in the same space and happily coexist with its use for waste vehicles.
Thank you. What have another question?
Okay, John. I have a question. Thank you. There's some reliance upon on-structure landscape to assist in providing a level of privacy of setback from the boundary. How do you propose to ensure in perpetuity or the life of the build that exists and therefore serves that purpose?
I think that if you look at our other projects, we have a very good record of maintaining on structure landscape. There's provisions in the strata bylaws that allow the body corporate to step in the event that an individual owner doesn't maintain their landscape to an adequate requirement. I think that there's simply the distance or the width of those planted beds does actually take people away from the edge. So the ability to look down is eliminated in any case. And very minimal landscaping in those planted beds would offer some improvement, but certainly through the selection of plant species. Those species will be selected on the basis that we're looking to mitigate privacy concerns, because I think that privacy runs both ways. We also have a concern for our residents and about the experience that they have as well.
Okay, thank you for that answer. I have a second question. I think in your documentation, you refer to the fact that the proposal exceeds 4-star Green Star. Could you explain how it does that, please?
It'll exceed it as certified as opposed to as documented. So it'll be externally audited and certified to ensure it meets that requirement. So certainly that's a high bar, and it's a bar that the design review panel were keen to see to enable us to achieve design excellence.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't have any further questions. Mr. Arias?
In relation to that point, Green Star rating and the Livable Design Australia, how do the two work? Do they work together, or are they completely separate?
I think we see them as being separate, but they're both about creating amenity, but in their own ways. In the same way that NABERS rating is also another rating that we look at, but I think it's those things working together or in combination that achieves, I think, excellence. But the livable standards relate more so to the amenity within the apartments as opposed to simply sustainability.
Which is what Green Star is
focused. Yes, it's focused on sustainable initiatives.
Okay, thank you.
Lovely. If there are no further questions of the presenters, we thank you for your presentation. We'll refer to questions of officers. And again, we have Stephen Piazzi, Brianna Murphy and Fiona Mullen. Councillor Cridland, did you have questions of the officers? Okay. Mr. Arias, questions of the officers?
If the officers can respond to the applicant's request for modification of conditions.
Yes, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Sure. So I'll just run through them in number order. So condition 5, Roman numeral 6, relating to the 301 balcony. So we don't support the alternate. Our view is that whilst the privacy can be addressed through increased landscaping and some modification, it's not just about privacy that's our concern. Our concern is also that the height of the screening and the landscaping, it basically comes into the view corridor, which is otherwise resulting in heights which you might not expect above the podium. And if you look at the way that the adjoining development is designed in terms of the lot shape, a lot of their views currently would be directly into this space. So our preference is to keep that relatively clear. And we also don't feel that the balcony serves any specifically needed purpose. There's a very high amenity balcony already which directly fronts onto South Perth Esplanade with exceptional views, which is over 70 square metres. So we don't think that the introduction of this side balcony, which is potentially having an impact on privacy and potentially impacting view corridors, is appropriate in this instance. With respect to conditions 6 and 7 for the silver/gold star livable design requirements, we would support and accept a full being achieving the silver as opposed to the gold. We still feel that this is above what would normally be expected, so consider it positive. In relation to condition 13C for the commercial car parking ratio. We support that reduction of 1 bay based on adjusted calculations. With respect to condition 13F relating to the loading bay, we don't support removal of that condition. We're not satisfied that a single loading bay / multi-purpose bay, I guess you could call it, is adequate to service 71 apartments, 3 commercial tenancies, including in addition to dealing with waste, it's going to be dealing with deliveries for those commercial tenancies, potentially deliveries to the apartments, loading and unloading of furniture. There's, we feel that the risk is high that it will result in impacts to the street, be that illegal on-street parking if there's inadequate space available, and there is limited parking available, and that may also be subject to change as these developments come into play, depending on how the traffic and the congestion plays out. So we feel that it's appropriate that development provide additional space to accommodate this purpose. I think that's all of them.
Any questions?
Further question. In the RAR indicates that the design review panel assessed the development on a number of occasions and came to the conclusion that apart from supporting it, it met design excellence, and the RAR indicates that the city's offices supports that position. Could you just expand on why you believe that's the case?
So with design excellence, you're required to demonstrate that you exceed the requirements of SPQ 7. Our view and our practice is that that doesn't necessarily mean you must exceed every single one of the principles, but you must exceed, at least a few of them. Our view is that the development does achieve exceptional amenity for the residents. It's achieving above what we would normally require for sustainability. And there are various other design elements, but we're of the opinion that this is presenting an outcome which is higher than what we would normally expect and require of a development, which was otherwise not seeking the additional height allowances.
Mr. Fanti, questions?
Yes, have you got any comments that you'd like to make in relation to the concerns expressed today in the material, but also today in the presentation about the impact on the neighbouring property, particularly in relation to future development? So my question fundamentally goes to, does this proposal impact the adjoining site's ability to achieve development consistent with the structure plan?
We would be of the view that it's not. With every development, you need to account for the context of what's surrounding you. There may be the case that they need to consider the design to maintain an appropriate level of privacy. Obviously, if we have the exact same development both sides with no screening, there will be direct views. That's just the way it works. But we have seen with other developments ways that designs can be made where you have your views oriented towards, the river, for example, in this case, and with only oblique views to the sides. So we feel that there are ways to design in privacy, but yeah, it potentially would affect the design in achieving the sort of amenity you want to achieve.
I probably should have clarified. I was more thinking about physical bulk and scale and things like not so much light and those types of things. I hadn't actually specifically thought about it as being just a privacy issue. It was more the physical bulk and scale.
In terms of built form, no.
That's my question. I do have another. All right. Think about the time.
Okay. The applicant in their comments on condition 5.6 and the way the condition is worded at the moment to amend the development in that location was that the balcony was inaccessible, that the planter was inaccessible, and therefore how would any planter or landscaping in that location provide the screening that I guess the city is assuming that it would. So I just want to understand why you've proposed that, you know, in lieu of the applicant's proposal, which at least allows access to that area to maintain that level of vegetation to assist in the privacy.
I guess in terms of it not being accessible, that was not part of the condition. It doesn't state that. The intent of the condition was to pull the balcony away from the boundary, make the area clear. And then there was the allowance added in to say, if you still wish to provide the planter as a border, provide a bit of privacy and amenity, then the condition allows for that to protrude into that 4 metre setback area.
Okay, and you feel the need to specify meterage in that respect, rather than just rest with condition 5 being amended plans to address, and then there be the opportunity for between the applicant and the city some compromise position, which might be not what you've written here. It might not be exactly what the applicant's showing us today, but it might be something that meets your requirements in the future. This is very definitive.
Yes, the intent was that we want to make it clear that we don't want that balcony within anywhere of that 4 metre setback. So no, we didn't want to allow that flexibility of negotiation later on. We want to be clear about what the intent is.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any further questions. Yes, Ms. Fun.
I have one question in relation to the street interface. We've heard from the applicant and we've got material in relation to the street interface along South Terrace. Do you have any comments about or do you have any response to make in relation to the ground level design, which incorporates cafe on the corner and residential at ground level?
We support.
Sorry, I should have said in the context of the structure plan.
Yep. So the structure plan prioritises Harbour Terrace as more of an active frontage and South Perth Esplanade as a semi-active, I believe. If you're familiar with the area, most of the developments, with the exception of Menn Street and Harbour Terrace, is all residential on South Perth Esplanade. So we feel it's an appropriate transition that the side away from Harbour Terrace be limited to residential to provide a more appropriate interface. And the design also deals with the internal concept of providing the lobby between the apartments and the cafe, which assists to separate it and it isn't unduly impacted.
Thank you.
All right. If there are no further questions, thank you to the officers for their responses. We'll move ahead with the responsible authority report. That recommends we approve this development subject to a number of conditions, which are all set out in various sections. So I'm seeking a mover, please, for that in the first instance. Is there a mover? Ms. Lafanti moves. Is there a seconder? Mr. Arias seconds. Ms. Lafanti is mover. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, comments are that I'm satisfied that the range of uses and scale of the proposal is consistent with the planning framework, and that includes the scheme as well as the activity centre provisions. I think that the mix of uses, particularly on Harper, will enhance the functionality, enhance the area, both for occupants as well as for the broader community. In terms of the discretion for additional height, I am satisfied that the proposal, as provided in its detail, as well as the RA, thank you officers, a very extensive RA, has suitably addressed the provisions and the discretionary provisions in order to achieve the additional height, bringing it up to a 11-storey building, and therefore it's eligible for assessment under the Tier 1. So I'm satisfied that it does contribute to the area and is considered design excellence based on the design. Overall, I think the design is an appropriate and excellent design for its location, obviously having direct frontage to the water, maximising the frontage and the visual opportunity of both water and its views across, incorporating a mix of activities moving down the site. I also think the incorporation of a large or two wings, I suppose, moving down the site, creating space internally, is an excellent opportunity to create a building of differing level amenities within it, and creating that opportunity for access and light, etc., to penetrate into the building. I also think that the setback from the rear does provide some opportunity in relation to the neighbouring sites. In the context of the neighbouring sites, I have given due consideration to the concerns and the submissions that have been raised. Particularly, there were a number of submissions raised in relation to impacts of development in terms of loss of views and the additional height, particularly around the impact of those views. A number of the submissions talked about buying into the area because of the views and potential loss of value of property. Having considered this proposal in the context of the structure plan that sits around it, and the planning framework that sits around it, as well as the material that the applicants have provided in relation to the views and the impact of those views, I'm satisfied that this development has appropriately considered those and that there are opportunities for views from those sites. Noting that the material we've also got included some information, and the imagery is provided, and here shows a 7-storey building versus an 11-storey building and the impacts. I note that that plan did show the building being pushed further back, and it indicated because of proximity to the buildings at the rear, a smaller, bulkier building would in fact create quite a significant block to view. So I'm satisfied that the design has appropriately addressed the issue and respectfully considered the neighbours. I understand the concerns raised, but I think in this context, the proposal works well. I note that it's been, there's some discretion sought in relation to non-residential development. It seemed initially to be something of concern, but given the proposal, its location, the comments that we've been given and the activity focused on Harper, acknowledging that the predominant residential would want to seek views and access to the water, as well as to provide that transition to the residential moving along. So from my perspective, I'm comfortable with discretion being given for the provision in relation to non-residential development. Overall, as I've already indicated, I think the development is exceptional. I do like the design. I like the nature of the design that's been created, specifically for its location. It is a type of both scale and form, the type of development we would expect to see and contemplated by the activity centre, and the intensity of the development is also appropriate.
Thank you. Mr Arias, as seconder, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, presiding member. From a zoning perspective, I think the proposed development fits in appropriately and is capable of being approved. In terms of the context, I also consider its location close to the Main Street Jetty and the Esplanade, South Perth Esplanade. It's an appropriate location to have this type of mixed-use activity. I would commend the design. I think it's thoughtful and appropriate for the location, and the design review panel sort of acknowledged that through its consideration and conclusion that it achieved design excellence. So I said I think it's a very good development concept. In terms of I also note that it's been considered eligible for Tier 1 provisions of Scheme 7, which supports the additional height, and that the city's officers also support that. I think it's of the development of a scale that's contemplated by the activity plan. So happy to support that also. Note concerns raised by some members of the community about bulk and scale and privacy. But I think the recommendations in the RAR acknowledge that, and there are conditions aimed at trying to minimise that, which I would endorse. So on that basis, I'm happy to support the motion to approve.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cridland, did you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you, presiding member. Overall, it's an attractive design. Well, so far as someone with my design qualifications, which are nil, can say, but it looks good to the eye, and I think it certainly will be much better than what is on those lots at the moment. I do note the local residents' concerns, in particular the people who bought into Aurelia, believing that they were going to have uninterrupted views forever. And from their perspective, I can see why they would say it is too high. And perhaps it does look a little high, but I don't think that's a reason for me to not approve it. I understand the concerns of the people at number 63. I think Mr. Simpson did a very good presentation in writing in particular, as well as his oral one, which enabled me to understand it. I appreciate it when people put things very simply. Harper Terrace, I don't live near here, but I do visit it. And that lot at number 11 is vacant at the moment. And it is used as a parking lot. And then, I don't know, there might be 50 cars parked there quite often because there is a shortage of car parking in the area. I do think there's going to be some traffic issues on Harper Terrace because there are now. It's a narrow street to go down and it is full of potholes. And I think the people who have their current offices or go to businesses there are probably going to be pretty unhappy while this is built. Hopefully the city can deal with that as best they can, because I'm sure the traffic and the potholes are going to get worse in the short term. So I do anticipate there will be more unhappiness, but when it is built, it will be attractive and it will be part of the rejuvenation and the change of this part of South Perth. And I will support it.
Thank you, Councillor Cridland. I'll speak to the motion. I support the development in the context of the centre zone, the RAC 0 coding and the activity centre structure plan requirements. I think this is actually quite a modest scale development of 11 stories in this particular location. I think it's very well designed and certainly respect the design review panel's opinion on it meeting design excellence, which has also been assessed and agreed with by the officers at the city. Therefore, the tier 1 height allocation is acceptable. I know that has been modified over discussions. I think what it does is change conditions for adjacent neighbours, but views to the city, CBD, are maintained. Certainly the way it's been designed, the impacts of overshadowing are limited. Privacy matters, again, that changes again in the context of it being an activity centre and the vision and aspirations for this area to accommodate more people in the form that's proposed by the structure plan. So I think those changes are to be expected, and you know, the way this has been designed seeks to limit it. I would like to propose some amending conditions. In the first instance, amendment 1, I would do on block, which would be for condition 6, to delete the words gold, insert the word silver level, and in the brackets, delete or higher. The second part to this motion is for condition 7, similarly to delete the word gold, insert the word silver before level, and delete or higher in brackets. And to amend condition 13C to delete the word 6 and introduce the word 5. That is my amending motion 1. Do I have a second? Mr. Arias, thank you. I don't think I need to speak to that. I think it has agreement from both city and applicant. They're minor modifications which don't substantially change the development. Mr. Arias?
No, nothing to add.
Further speakers on amendment 1? Those in favour of amendment 1? That's unanimous. Thank you. I'd like to propose a second amending motion to condition 13F, and that would be to delete 13F. Do I have a seconder for that, please? I don't have a seconder, therefore my amendment lapses for want of a seconder. I'll further propose an amendment to condition 5, numeral 6, to delete 6 from that condition. Do I have a seconder for that?
Presiding member, can you just clarify again?
Yes, it's to delete 6, which of the condition which talks to the balcony design, that the city is proposing to pull the balcony back, which would just therefore allow for that condition to relate to alternate designs.
So it would be left to the applicant and the city to come to some arrangement.
Indeed, condition 5 requires amended plans which have been put forward.
Presiding, I'm happy to support that.
Thank you very much. So, yep. So that's moved by me, seconded by Mr. Arias. I will speak to it therefore because I have a seconder. The reason I'm proposing this is that I think there may be opportunities to respect the privacy of the adjoining development, but also to maintain a level of amenity for this development, and again to ensure that there is adequate on-structure landscape to soften the build, and again to provide amenity and to provide access to that. And I think that the very prescriptive nature of 5.6 as it's written at the moment, there may be some modification to that which the applicant can put forward, which satisfies the city whilst meeting some of those privacy concerns, but still upholding a level of amenity for future occupants of this development. Mr. Arias?
Yeah. Just to add, I would support the change on the basis it provides scope for the applicant and the city to achieve what the objective is in terms of providing privacy and outlook, but perhaps not in such a prescriptive manner. Happy to have that a matter for negotiation between the two parties.
Thank you, Mr. Arias. Any other speakers on this amending motion?
I'm comfortable to, I don't support the amendment, I should say. I think that the current proposal can be retained, and being quite specific, I think is beneficial. I don't think there's any need to make changes to it, and there are other things that interact in relation to this proposal. So I'm comfortable that this change is not appropriate at this point in time in this context.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cridland?
No, thank you.
Okay. Those in favour of this amending motion? That's 2, Mr. Arias and Ms. Hyde. Those against? That's Councillor Cridland and Councillor Cridland and Lafanti. I have the casting vote in that situation. I therefore vote for the amendment to condition 5.6. I don't propose any further amending motions, and I don't propose to say anything further, so I refer back to Ms. Lafanti as mover to close debate.
Thank you. I think, as I've already indicated, thanks everybody for what your comments have been. The proposal is excellent development in this location, noting that the location itself has got excellent accessibility in relation to obviously the range of uses in the area, as well as obviously the river and the transportation that provides along there, which is quite unique in that respect in Perth anyway. In terms of the congestion in the area, I do acknowledge that over time the area will continue to congest, but that's not necessarily a bad thing for an activity centre, particularly in this location. It is a high demand area, not just for occupants and residents, but also for the general public to go to, providing great access into and around the area, as well as the amenity, as well as the range of activities that you can access from within there, as well as obviously its location and proximity of views to the city, which attracts both residents, but also attracts an enormous number of people to the area on a casual basis to enjoy the amenity that the area has. So this form of development is, in my perspective, an appropriate style of development in this very intense inner section of that activity plan and is suitable in its design.
Thank you very much. We'll put this matter to the vote then. Those in favour of the substantive as amended, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving swiftly through the rest of the agenda, we have nothing to note at item 4, Form 2s, nothing for SAT reconsiderations. Today, there are for this particular DAP a number of matters before the SAT at the moment, including a couple for the City of South Perth. With that, there's no further business. I'd like to thank applicants and officers for this part of the meeting, thank the panel for this part of the meeting, and draw the meeting to a close at 12:49.